check with Griffin and David. Blank check with Griffin and David. Don't know what to say or to expect. All you need to know is that the name of the show is Blank Check.
A podcast wouldn't do that.
This isn't a podcast. This isn't a podcast. I'm giving you alternate reads here.
Sure.
You just seem mildly
This
bemused.
isn't a podcast. I'm trying to think of my pleasance.
I was gonna do
This isn't a podcast.
the big Loomis speech, but then I realized a thing I should not say, and I'm about to say it is the Blackest podcast.
Right, we're not
The Devil's podcast.
Right.
That's misrepresenting this show. That will disappoint two different audiences.
Right, yeah. Good call. Good call.
This is not the Devil's podcast, in fact.
Well, sometimes it feels that way. Go ahead.
And some people think.
Yes.
Yes. And everyone's entitled to their opinion, but this is, in fact, a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David. Just starting it off.
Let's just start it off, right? Because I think we have a lot to get to today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want, and sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they bounce baby.
Mm-hmm.
This is a mini-series on the films of John Carpenter.
Yep.
It's called They Podcast because I was overruled.
Yep. Good call by us.
Yeah, I feel good about that choice still to this day. I've read some of the comments when Marie put out the new miniseries artwork.
Yep.
And I thought Podcast from New York was maybe like a good alt that we didn't actually really think of.
I've never pitched that. I pitched Podscape from Newcast.
Right, which was stupid.
Well, no,
Right,
that was
overruled
dumb,
that.
and we
Right.
didn't like that.
I felt
And
pretty vindicated by the comments saying, why isn't this miniseries named Sweaty enough?
Right, but here's the thing. None of them actually said a title. You know, no one. It wasn't like sometimes they're all in on like it should have been called X title.
What was? Do we know what was in the running?
Yeah, we know.
I mean, from you, not from
Podscape from Newcast. Pod Trouble and Little Casta.
See, no, it was
there's
Little
one.
Casty.
There's one that just already is on my mind that makes perfect sense.
What?
In the Pod of Castness.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. Assault on Podcast 13. I feel like was thrown out at one point.
Yep. That was like, yeah, that was another good option. But come on. They podcast, that's fun, that's good.
Well, they do. You do.
We do.
We do.
They podcast now?
Yeah.
And
We podcast now.
I'm happy to be in person with you guys.
In
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
In person for the first time in 2 years now.
For us?
Yeah.
Oh, easily.
Right?
When would the last time
I think
even
the last
be?
time would have just been something at David's apartment.
Right. You were
'Cause
last on the show.
I don't even have a
year
memory
ago,
of being at a studio.
And I think it was probably a year before that. A Spider-Man commentary.
Yeah, at David's house.
Right.
But that's 2019, yeah,
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Pretty much almost to the day.
Yeah.
Oh
boy.
And I gotta say, cat's out of the bag. This is our Halloween episode.
Correct.
Guest is director, filmmaker Alex Ross Perry.
Uh-huh.
Everyone, and I feel triumphant about this.
Yes.
It's like, all right, so what's he doing? Memoirs of an Invisible
Everyone
Man,
is
Everyone's right.
vampires.
You're
like,
playing your
what's the-
usual game. What's the
Everyone's
least
right.
essential
Everyone's
movie in a
right.
filmography?
They're all right, and I it's a big surprise.
Yes.
You decided to break your streak of trying to pick the most irrelevant
I
film.
should be doing one of those. David, how
Village of the Damned, one of those.
It would have been Memoirs.
Memoirs,
It was the
yeah.
only one I've never seen
Yeah.
Yes.
at this point. But David,
That's
how,
another thing. You like cold watching.
Yeah,
You
well,
do, right.
especially someone who means a lot. But
Sure.
David, how many minutes after the end of March Madness did I call this episode?
You didn't do it during? Honestly?
I think it was during the final day. I said,
Sure.
if Carpenter wins, I want Halloween.
You were very angry. On one of the March Madness updates, we casually said Carpenter essentially created a genre, and you kind of blew up both of us
Yes.
over
He
the
didn't-
phone.
He didn't blow me up. I
Maybe
gotta
I-
say, this is something that happened to Griffin,
Really?
not me. Yeah, I didn't get blown up.
Maybe I blew up privately. Maybe I blew you up in person.
No, you blew me up over not knowing the movie
Burnt Offerings.
Burnt Offerings. That was
Right.
the one that you were mad at me about not knowing about that
This
movie.
came up
which
in
is
Oops
fair.
All Box
That's fine.
Office.
Yes.
You guys were reading it.
And maybe he blew you up because you said he invented a genre or whatever. He had separate
Right.
blow-ups at separate times
Here's
over
here's
70s
blow-ups.
horror.
He
Right.
separated them.
Here are the facts, I think.
Okay.
Two things. One, I was very hurt by my pathetic and embarrassing loss in March Madness. And I
Well-
wanted to
Okay.
I want to talk about that for exactly 5 minutes.
Well,
And
we can very briefly talk about that,
and
but I
as
will
that
say
pertains to my wanting this for wanting this episode.
Okay.
Just, well, let's put time on the clock.
just to be clear, at March Madness, we had some friends of the show pick directors.
Right. This is once a year. We let
you know,
people vote
yeah,
for
yeah,
what
yeah.
miniseries we're going to do. And this year we mixed it up and we had one region where we picked 8 of our favorite recurring guests and let them each pick a director.
And I said to Alex, "Who do you want?" And you were
I've been
weighing a
lobbying for
couple-
years that you guys really should consider covering Oliver Stone.
I think we should put 5 minutes on the clock now. I know you're saying you want to say something first, but let's have this count for the 5 minutes.
I've put 5 minutes on the clock.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'm
it's
going
on
to
the
cut
clock.
this
No,
off.
we
We're
don't
in
need
the-
to go over.
I
we have
just
too
need
much
to
to
say
get through.
something. I told you when you said Oliver Stone, I was like, Alex, Oliver Stone is not going to win a single Twitter poll. He's not cool. He's the opposite of what people on Twitter are interested in. I'm just saying. I warned you. I'm like,
And
I understand what you're
said-
saying. You were like, what are you talking about? Bulletproof case, that you guys
Yes.
have to cover.
I
Right.
said anybody who loves this show the way I do will instantly be like, that is 5 months of incredible episodes.
You
with
are-
wonderful insights on some of the most important films of American cinema of the 1980s, 1990s, and even a little bit in the 2000s. If you love the show the way I do, you will be like, I have to hear that miniseries. And it turns out most people don't love the show the same way.
Well, I was also just trying. You're not on Twitter, to your credit.
That's the other thing. I was
This
not
is the
able to
thing.
mobilize any
Yes.
fan base because I don't have one.
But beyond that, I was just like, if you take the temperature of sort of Twitter,
Sure.
Oliver Stone, he's peanut butter and pickles. Like no one's interested.
He's interviewing Putin long form.
Right. He's just not in a place right now where people are fired up about
I
him.
was really humiliated by this. And I thought it was really sad because we were denied something that could be great. It's not that I wanted him to win. I didn't think that would happen. I wanted him to build enough momentum that at some point he
thought
seemed
might
undeniable.
sneak by maybe
A couple.
Jackie Chan.
I wanted a couple victories. However, I also was very clear that the only thing I actually wanted was a winner from Ben's region.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I really wanted was for John Carpenter to win because this is a no-brainer.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, I'm so low from this and I want to be on again, but I also don't want to just be like, well, I tried with a candidate and I lost. So here I am. We're talking about one of his irrelevant films.
Right. You don't want to just be given the Secretary of Transportation in the
Right,
cabinet.
right.
Exactly.
Right.
I said, if this is happening, no one, if somebody wins their candidate, they
Sure.
would probably pick the totemic episode.
And when we did a fair amount of this, of offering to the people who had not been on in a little while and had other candidates in March Madness, like you get an early pick. You can
Yes.
pick a big one.
And I wanted the biggest because I knew Ben, maybe he could have said, actually, I just want that episode to be private, no guests.
Well, yeah,
for such a big
yeah.
one?
I mean, we do that sometimes,
We do that
but no.
sometimes.
But I
Sometimes for
feel
the
like
big
this
one,
is
yeah.
just this director. I mean, Johnny Boy is just so beloved,
Johnny
and
Boy.
I feel like we wanted to have as many people on for this series as we could. So
Yeah. I want to say something to your credit. You raised a good point, not a stink, but a good point after the fact that we should have considered, which is first round matchup. You should have gone up against JD as the two people without Twitter.
It
That
just
perhaps
seems like
it was
a very-
unfair to put the two of you up against people who were able to
A
mobilize.
very brutal
Right.
weapon
Yes.
just to say to your followers, do me a favor, click on this thing. You don't know what it is, but I
Well,
will-
this is why we're done with Twitter.
good.
Yeah.
So next year you'll put Stone back in and he'll go the distance because
Sure, fine. He
His
can be in
dark
there. Well,
web
God
fans.
knows what we're going to do.
Was
next
he
year.
in our Oscar versus Razzie bracket?
no, you would never had him in. If I looked at all 32, I would have said the only two of these that I really think would be wall to wall great are Stone and Carpenter.
Wow.
Like these are just the best assortment of episodes,
Yeah.
variety of films.
I'll say this: when Jonathan Demme won,
I was wrong.
you're
I've
swinging
gone on
in
the
being
record.
like, "This is a disaster."
But now
for
I
the
know.
show.
I thought, and I told you this, and this was
Yeah.
part of my argument. Stone is the dark Sith to the Demi Jedi. It's the same exact filmography arc,
Right.
the same highs and lows. And I said he's the same as Zemeckis. It's these kinds of guys. These are great miniseries.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're done
I
talking
don't
about it.
disagree
We're done talking
in
about it.
theory.
I'm going to be so
I want to say one
stringent
final thing.
in keeping this focused on the film Halloween.
Sure. That's why I want to say just one final
which
thing.
thanks to my structure, I will not get to for 45 minutes. But then when I do, we're talking about it.
Alex has come prepared with notes. He's got a notebook.
It's
He's
not-
got several
the
printed
notebook-
pieces of paper
the
and
notebook
things on his phone.
is what I wrote down while watching the film.
Okay.
The several pages I have printed out here is
The syllabus.
It's my syllabus. I came here to relitigate March Madness.
Yeah.
I came here to school you guys on the history of American horror as a genre from 1968 to 1978 in order to understand the context for what Carpenter did with this film and his subsequent career.
Right.
And chew bubblegum. And I'm all out of
Wow.
bubblegum.
Those
And I'm
are-
all
okay,
out of
those
March-
are the three
And I'm
things.
all out of relitigation.
Okay.
But anyway, fans have demanded John Carpenter, and they're right. And John Carpenter is a hero and an absolute titan of cinema. And one of the finest filmmakers of the second half of the 20th century, no question, I think. But in order to understand him, I think there's a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of context that you need to understand.
Okay.
Leading up to the film Halloween, which we will be talking about in, as I told David last week, excruciating detail.
This is, I feel like, truly in every way the least work I have done for an episode in as long as I can remember. In that even rewatching this movie, I was barely trying to formulate thoughts because I was like, Alex is going to do whatever Alex is going to do. Our hands are off the wheel on this one, you know?
Yes.
I'm just prepared for you to guide us through this.
I love listening to your show, and I love talking to you guys as friends. But it has come up many times that horror is a humongous blind spot. Self-admitted in some cases.
Sure.
But David really still remembers how brutally I raked him over the coals for on the Oops All box office episode. You guys chortling and saying there's some burnt offerings. Like, is this a real movie? Oliver Reed is in this. And I was like, David, this is a beloved film that and we all share the same we all have the same DNA of nerdery, right? We're all trivia veterans. We could all sit at trivia and basically hit the same rounds. But then within these subsections of nerdery, there are these other things that one person knows everything about and one person knows nothing about. And that's kind of the beauty of people that have essentially the same interest, but the interests diverge. And it also comes up a lot where I feel like David, you were saying last year, you spent a lot of time familiarizing yourself with a lot of the horror franchises that you had said you had not seen.
Fun project. Well, I'd seen some, but I'd never seen every entry. And
You
it was
made
fun
it an
to make
effort
it a
to
project.
go through the totemic franchises
The big
because these were
American
blind
boys.
spots and you
Sure.
wanted
Big
them
boys.
filled in. And Ben, you're obviously you're a big horror guy, more so.
Yeah,
Just because you're from scumbag country like I am.
Yep,
Pennsylvania, New
absolutely.
Jersey,
Yep.
people like to wear cutoff shorts and sleeveless shirts and wear horror and get weird. Or
And
wear
drink a
horror
ton of
shirts and get
soda,
weird.
which
Yeah.
is what we were talking about
Drink
before
soda.
we started this episode.
Be kind of raw. And I just felt like if
I mean,
could,
Hellraiser's like a hero of mine.
yeah, Pinhead, he's a close personal friend. Pinhead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're pen pals, but not in the way you think.
You're
We
kind
send
of
each
like-
other
you're-
nails.
I've seen Hellraiser many times, but I've never seen a Hellraiser sequel.
Okay, see, that's a big problem.
That's the thing. This is what I'm talking about, where it's like there's only
Ben, have you
there's
seen
so
the third
many
Hellraiser?
avenues.
The third Hellraiser is the cyberpunk Hellraiser.
So this
That's
is
a
actually
Hell on Earth.
This is
I
the
believe.
one with CD.
Yes, the
right?
one with flying
See, this
CDs.
is
Yeah.
like such a good reminder. I
If the
have to
phrase-
see this.
I can't. A cyberpunk Hellraiser is a real Ben phrase, but
Man,
Ben's kind of like the Renfield to the Cenobites, where they're like kind of making you pay your dues, and then they'll potentially welcome you into the Cenobite army.
I'm aware of the CD Hellraiser. In that
When we
sort of
watched the Hellraiser
osmosis way.
franchise,
I talked to you about...
Right.
the
Yeah.
first
That's what I'm saying.
Hellraiser.
He comes up.
The first Hellraiser is a masterpiece. I love
It is.
Hellraiser.
It's wonderful.
And then
Fucking rules.
a couple of Halloweens ago at home, me and my wife Anna, I said, let's watch Hellraiser 2. And she said, this is pretty good. And we watched Hellraiser 3. And she said, this is the last Hellraiser I'm watching. I'm finished with Hellraiser.
She was out. She didn't make it a
the
bloodline.
And keeping him, okay, we're going to get to talking about horror sequels, but we're not going to talk about Hellraiser because it comes
That's
after
post.
Halloween.
Can I just ask? Do
Yeah.
they stop being theatrical after 3?
No, I think
Bloodline is the last one.
Four is-
The last. But then isn't there? There's like a guy who came on board for the direct-to-video ones that made a couple that are are well liked.
There
right?
are. I haven't gotten into those.
I know, and this is the whole thing about horror. Is if we're talking about this, is it's so dense because these movies can be made so cheaply that there's so many, and I get over. It's like anime. Well, not that I've seen a lot more horror than I've seen anime, but where I'm like, oh god, I can't. Like, there's too. I'm just digging and digging and finding more things, and I'm getting overwhelmed.
Yes, but the thing is, horror fans will see everything. It is a monolithic genre. Like, you can, if it's your thing, you can see everything. And if you look at horror fans or you talk to them, it's like this bullshit Netflix horror movie, I watched it. Straight to Shudder horror movie, I watched it.
Right.
New direct-to-video Amityville movie, I watched it. And that's the relationship that horror fans have with the genre. And I feel like coming on, this is the third Carpenter film, before any of his other horror films. And I feel like coming on to kind of talk about what the genre was when he changed it forever with this film. And what he brought to it, to contextualize his innovations as a filmmaker, a director of the camera, really, and his use of music and writing is just so essential, not just to Halloween, but to the rest of the Carpenter miniseries.
Can I just say, just to sort of like frame my blind spots?
Yes. I'm going to say we're starting in 1968.
Okay, because this is just all I want to say is that, like, certainly is not my genre of strength, right? In terms of movie knowledge to begin with. But also I feel like in high school I went through this period where I was just like, homework's irrelevant. I'm just going to watch movies all the time.
Definitely.
Which worked out really, really
homework
well
is
for me.
irrelevant. Yeah, homework sucks.
Yeah, fucking homework is the worst.
It's for losers.
It's pretty bad.
It's for losers and babies. And so I was very much like systematically going through blind spots in sort of what I perceived as a 15-year-old of like my film knowledge and stuff, right? So a lot of that was sort of what David was saying of like, oh, I need to watch the first movie of every franchise. So I kind of like did that and then would move on because I was trying to cover as many of the icons as possible without going deep into them. Freddy and Chucky are the two guys I went deep on. Unsurprisingly, they reflect the two sides of my
bad
personality.
boys and stinkers.
Right.
When also Freddy has so much practical effects and sort of fantasy elements and very Griffey stuff.
Well, and it's essentially a comedian and a toy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Beyond that, my horror preferences just in terms of aesthetics and vibe or whatever, not that I position myself as being expert, is like pre-1960.
Okay.
Like German expressionist horror
like
stuff,
the
Universal
Universals,
Monsters,
right.
even sort of like Vincent Price, early Vincent Price, Roger Corman or
This
whatever.
fucking guy.
Ben's giving
I'm not
you
saying this in pretension.
No, but there's I have a transition from that, which is very.
That's all I just want to
Okay,
say.
now
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned 1960 because the first thing you have to mention is Psycho,
Of course.
which is the first movie of its kind that Halloween is a movie of its kind. There is nothing before Psycho that is like that. That is like the premise of this movie is somebody picks up a knife and they use it
what
to
if
kill
there was
people.
a guy who killed people?
They use the knife repeatedly to stab people through their body, and then the person is dead, and then they go to another.
One
Wait,
could
isn't
even
there that
say-
German expressionist movie M?
Yeah,
the guy
he's
is
a child
kidnapper.
M is different.
He's okay.
Yeah, he's
Psycho is what if there was a psycho?
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
Sure.
And M is less of a horror movie, is more framed around trying to catch this guy.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
It's a little
He
more
is targeted.
And he's like,
we really jumped down Ben's throat to correct him about what M is
listen
about.
up,
no,
Ben, listen
no,
up, Ben.
no.
We'll
It's
do
good,
some
it's
M
good.
But
explaining.
look,
Yeah.
But Psycho 1960, yes, that is obviously a huge thing. Anna, also, when I was telling her about my thesis I was going to present, said, make sure you mention Peeping Tom, which is 61.
Great. Isn't it later? Maybe not. Let me look it up. No, it's 60. It's also
Okay.
60.
So those two movies, 1960, are kind of two sides of the coin, opposite sides of the ocean.
And Psycho is beloved, gets
Yes.
Oscar nominations, is a huge hit. Peeping Tom essentially ruins a career.
But it's Peeping Tom, much like Psycho, is a very pathological movie, but Psycho is a slasher at its heart, whereas I think Peeping Tom is like a very psychological.
That's
Yes.
not really
Yes.
a
and it's
horror
very
movie.
meta.
Right. Yes.
It has these kind of murderous elements.
It implicates the audience.
It disturbed people and it was like prurient. Whereas
Yeah.
like Psycho is like a roller coaster.
Yes.
And
I've
it's
never
great.
seen Peeping Tom.
Oh,
You
Ben.
love it, Ben. You're the
I mean,
paper.
I know.
Can we
I
tell
gotta
you
check
what
it
the
out.
basic premise of this movie is?
Please.
It's a guy who's obsessed with the look on people's faces when they know they're about to die. He's a cameraman and he builds a blade into one of the legs of his tripod and he like films women thinking that they're doing like screen tests and he stabs them on camera.
Oh my
That
god.
movie could be remade
Wow.
about a podcaster now.
Absolutely.
Anyway, you're going to hear me say anyway a lot
Okay.
while we're going through this.
Yes.
Anyway.
Anyway.
Okay. one of the most important things about Halloween that people who come to it always talk about, always know. Halloween, independent movie.
Yes.
Very successful independent movie. Horror then becomes, for many years, something that is largely independent or very low budget studio movies. But in order to understand how revolutionary it is that in 1978, there was an independent horror movie that became such a mainstream hit, I just want to very briefly talk about studio horror movies from 1968 to 1978, because everything you're saying, your Val Lewton movies, your Universal Monsters, horror was a studio thing.
Right.
And it was a classy studio
But
thing.
And you're not going to talk, why 68?
Two things happened in 1968. Also, it gives us a clean decade.
Sure.
Two things happened in 1968. There are two big bangs. Studio Big Bang, 1968, is Rosemary's Baby.
Sure.
There had not been a studio horror movie like Rosemary's Baby for years. Rosemary's Baby is produced by William Castle, who was a purveyor of schlocky horror, cheap thrills throughout the 60s, such as you're saying you might gravitate more towards.
The Tingler.
The Tingler, Mr. Sardonicus,
Yes.
Prowler, 13 Ghosts.
Yep.
So
My kind of stuff.
So
A lot
Rosemary's-
of the names.
Oh yeah.
Watch out.
Well, what if there was a Tingler?
But then
Right.
there's
There was
also
a
like
blog.
there's like The Haunting, which is like a pretty Tony studio
there's
movie.
lots
It's
of
also rules.
There's lots of ghost movies,
Right.
Ghost
Ghost stories.
haunted house. And we'll get to the divergent why it's so revolutionary to have a movie about a guy with a knife.
Yes. Right.
But Rosemary's Baby kind of progresses. You're right. I've written down here 1958, House on Haunted Hill, and The Tingler. Those are William Castle movies, very gimmicky.
Another thing I just think worth mentioning very briefly is that in earlier decades, you would go to the movies and you would see a bill of shit. And B movies were literally the backup movie, and people would see horror films. They were the lesser films that were like the added value behind whatever the prestige movie were. And by the 60s and 70s, people are going mostly to see one movie.
One movie. So there, you no longer have 60-minute Boris Karloff movies about a guy who opens a sarcophagus.
Right, but
Hey.
there's always a market to be making
Look
these
out.
movies for cheap because they need something to play after.
But to me, a crucial, we're not going into this, but a crucial 60s figure is Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Right.
Who made,
Master of Gore.
yes, totally violent, cheap, low budget, independent movies throughout the 60s. It's not mainstream, therefore it doesn't really factor into this conversation, but I'm not going to not mention someone.
Godfather of Gore.
The Godfather of
Yes,
Gore.
I'm sorry.
As the name of his documentary, I believe.
I've only seen like
2000 Maniacs, Wizard of Gore is my
I've
favorite.
seen Wizard of Gore.
Blood
right.
Feast, which is an Egyptian themed thing.
Right.
I believe there's a sarcophagus in that. Color Me Blood Red, The Gruesome Twosome, The Gorgor Girls. All of his movies are terrific.
Sure.
But it's pure exploitation. I'm not talking about exploitation. Studio horror movies, because exploitation always exists parallel. It exists throughout the 60s. But Rosemary's Baby is such a huge hit.
When you said that there hadn't been a film like Rosemary's Baby for years, are you saying that essentially there's like a space between Psycho and Rosemary that's not filled in?
Essentially,
By the
yes. In
studios,
terms
okay.
of like, Psycho Universal, Rosemary's Baby Paramount.
Right.
The studios are not saying what A-list top shelf directors could make a horror movie that we are going to take very seriously and will end up with Oscar nominations.
Right.
That's
Rosemary-
not a thing.
Obviously based on a book.
Yes.
It's this very bougie movie about being middle class and buying an apartment
Yes.
and having children.
Very
and, right, yeah.
specific milieu. And we're going to, I'll come back to that in a minute, but I just want to quickly run down. After that movie, there is, up into Halloween, something of a boom of studios making horror films.
Sure, because it's a huge thing.
It's
a huge hit.
and of
Jump
course,
on the trend, right?
people try to copy this. There's not a ton of them, but there are a handful. I'm going to run them down. And these are in order. I put these in order.
Okay.
And weirdly, the first one of these is the only one that functions as basically an independent film, but it is a Paramount film, which is 1971, Let's Scare Jessica to Death, which is a film I love. I feel like it's a film people who see it love it.
Yeah,
I know,
one of the all-time great titles.
yes,
too.
a great title.
It's also it's got that great tagline. Now I've got to right. Something is after Jessica. Something very cold, very wet, and very dead.
Hey.
Yes.
And literally,
It's a great film.
perked his head
But
up.
it is weird
mention
that
of
that's
wet.
kind of in my, again, there are gaps in my research, but that is kind of the first, like, it's a big studio movie. It's a Paramount movie, but it's just like this. It could also have just been a Halloween, an Embassy Pictures.
It was
release,
a Paramount movie, but it was like a rounding error for Paramount.
basically.
Right.
Cheap little movie. Yep.
1971 is a great movie that Fox makes called The Mephisto Waltz, which is Alan Alda playing a pianist. It is scene for scene the same as Rosemary's Baby.
I know nothing of this, but it sounds like my
It's really
An
good.
occult kind of
Yes.
movie again.
We
right.
watched this a couple years ago, and it's like oh, well, this is 3 years after Rosemary's Baby. And they were like, so in Rosemary's Baby, John Cassavetes is an actor. In this movie, we should make Alan Alda a pianist.
It's the Mephisto Waltz.
Mephisto Waltz. And he sells his soul to the devil to become a better pianist.
Sure.
It's actually really good.
Yeah.
It's really fun. Alan Alda, pretty good in a horror movie context.
Directed
This
by
dang
Paul,
devil coming for my soul.
Paul Wendkos. That's his name. I don't know.
Good movie. Just wanted to mention it. The next big one, 1973. It's a big movie. It's The Exorcist.
Big one. One
Yeah.
of the most successful films ever made.
A hit.
We're going to come back to it, but I just want to say at this point, worldwide, 597 million adjusted. Warner Brothers, 10 Oscar nominations.
Right. It's one of the 5 highest grossing movies of
Beyond
all
that,
time.
though,
at that
also
point.
the book was one of those books. I was not alive at the time, but I feel like it was one of those books that was on every coffee table. It was like a blockbuster book too. Again, like the book often helps here, right? If you're adapting from a best-selling novel. Have you ever, the cover of The Exorcist is
Yeah.
like
I feel
famous
like
for
every beach
scaring
house.
young children.
Sure.
Exactly.
I
yeah.
would stay at it. Would be.
I just
there.
decided this Halloween I'm going to reread The Exorcist and read Legion.
Read Legion.
But
Are
I've
you going to
never read.
watch Exorcist 3 or?
I've seen Exorcist 3.
I know. I'm saying, you like to do a rewatch marathon
Yeah,
sometimes
we might.
themed.
I haven't watched The Exorcist in
Every
years.
July 4th, you text me about whatever like political thriller
Yes.
made the cut this year or whatever.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
thrillers.
Yeah.
Well,
thrillers.
but here's the
Did
thing
you
with
watch the
Exorcist,
package
though.
yet?
Not yet. I'm gonna.
We can't get into it, but there's a great movie on HBO called, or maybe it's on Amazon now,
think
The
Amazon,
Package with Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones.
Sounds good.
Cold War thriller.
Yeah.
It's just such a David movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, Exorcist, 1973, huge hit. Weirdly, this I was actually surprised by. 1973, Don't Look Now, not a studio film. I thought that this
It's
was
like an art film.
Right.
It is, but I thought MGM made it. But I think that's just because I'm picturing the old DVD.
They had the home video rights for a while.
No, it's whatever. It's like a British.
So
and
it bears
Italian.
mentioning, but it kind of exists outside. Now, weirdly, by this time,
Also classy. Also based on.
so that's the thing, is
Daphne
that a lot of
du Maurier,
these are quite classy. And that-
A-list stars.
Yeah.
A-list
And
stars,
these-
but
these
also
movies-
has fucking.
this genre,
Got some fucking in it.
this genre now in my chronology, only 5 years away from Halloween, is very A-list. You're bringing in a lot of big
Yes.
actors.
Tony.
But and then there's just a few more. But even at this point, I found it interesting that De Palma has not really gone horror yet.
yeah.
No, he's
Sisters
still doing.
is 1972.
Right.
And
That's horror.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Carrie is 1976. But then those are the only horror movies he's made.
Because
around
Phantom
this
of the
time.
Paradise doesn't really count
No.
as horror. I mean, obviously it's sort of horror,
No.
nodding to it.
No,
or,
but he is not
spoofing
yet a
it.
horror filmmaker.
Right.
Carrie's United Artists, so that's a studio movie.
But
And then
again,
yes,
based on a book.
as you mentioned, star driven. Now, but these ones, some of these aren't quite horror, and some of these are going to come up again in a minute.
Okay.
But just the rest of this list now from 74 to 78, studio horror.
Where it's starting to ramp up a little.
A little
bit.
bit.
Yeah. Okay.
It's Alive, 1974, Warner Brothers, Larry Cohen's movie, Evil Baby. Stepford Wives, 1975, Columbia. Rosemary's Baby Connection. Ira Levin or Lewin?
Yeah.
Ira 11.
Ira
Yeah.
Levin.
Yeah.
So again, Stepford Wives, kind of horror, kind of satire.
Yeah.
But that's a Columbia movie, kind of a hit. 1976, The Omen, Fox. Huge hit. Coming
Huge hit.
back to that in a minute.
Yeah.
1976, Burn Offerings, United Artists distributed. Great movie. Amityville Horror before Amityville Horror.
David's avoiding eye contact. He does
People
not want to
moving-
face the wrath.
People moving into a house that is evil. Totally good movie.
But Amityville Horror, so Burn Offerings is 76. The Amityville Horror book comes out 77.
So the true story is maybe.
Yeah, of course, the true story book that definitely happened. The movie is when?
79.
79.
And we're coming
Okay.
I know that that's just after Halloween,
Right.
but I have to mention it in a minute. The rest of these, 77, Audrey Rose. Don't know if you've ever seen that. It's
Don't
a
know
good
that
little
movie.
creepy girl movie. I think there's a ghost. I think it has a ghost element. I've
There's
only
also
seen
been
one.
a shift, though. Even
These
just
are all
as-
UA.
That's Robert Wise.
But
Yeah.
I feel like these 8 years you've covered, right? It's starting out with like, oh, it's proven directors, international art house auteurs, this and that.
and often based on a bestseller.
We're
Right.
making classy films that
Right.
can, as you said, be sold as a single feature.
Right.
Demon Seed, 1977, USA.
Yeah.
Julie Christie,
Yeah.
sort of evil technology movie. Ben, Demon Seed,
Never seen it.
evil technology.
Cool.
What if the
What if,
computer?
what if you gave your house to a
knocked
computer
you
and
up?
the computer tried to make you pregnant?
Yeah. And what if a witch hacked that computer?
77 is also The Sentinel, which is Universal,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like is a movie that people have come back around to. But these are the kinds of movies that start to just have tons of stars from
Right.
like the 40s.
The Sentinel is a Michael Winner movie, and
Yes.
if you grew up in Britain,
which no one here did.
Which
so.
I did.
Irrelevant. What?
You know Michael Winner. Obviously, he directed Death Wish as well, and
You grew up. Sorry.
Wait. Is the new shock that I grew up?
Yeah. I thought you were just a big kid now.
I am a big kid
He's
now.
like a very big boy.
Michael Winner became a guy who would he was like a pitch man. It was weird.
Well, what
The
was his
director?
What
Yeah,
was
he
his
became
column?
this,
What
like,
was his
raconteur.
column called?
I
Don't look it up. Don't look it up.
I don't know what it was called. You have to tell
Well,
me.
okay, Michael Winner. Don't look it up.
Winner takes it all?
No, Michael Winner wrote a column for 1,000 columns. I
Winner
think,
Circle?
about restaurant reviews.
Yes.
What was his column called? Griffin, where does your brain
I know
go?
what it
Winner's dinner.
Winner's dinners.
Right. He became this guy who would like wear a cravat and say Britain used to be better before, and he would tail off, and you were supposed
Before I
to
directed
read
Death
into what he was
Wish.
talking about. And you were like, aren't you the guy who made these like trashy ass movies in the 70s?
so bizarre.
Anyway,
He's an odd figure. Anyway,
yeah.
The Sentinel, I think, is that set in Brooklyn, right? That's like a Brooklyn Heights movie.
The Sentinel is indeed set in Brooklyn
Yeah,
Heights.
it's a great movie. 1978.
Chris
the-
Sarandon, Martin Balsam. Yeah.
But it's got the Sentinel has like a cast of. I'm not mistaken that there are like
Ava Gardner's in
right.
it.
There are like golden age actors.
Burgess
in it.
Meredith.
Yeah, you
Yes.
know, if they made a Brooklyn Heights horror movie today, it'd be about the coffee shop running out of oat milk. Brooklyn Heights horror movie. What's the terror here? Oat milk.
Nobody knew how to respond to that.
Yeah, he took a shot.
I have two more
Hey,
things. I'm
shoot
gonna
your
mention.
shot. That's what they say now.
And we
Great horror.
admire you for that.
Thank
Two
you.
more of these movies: The Legacy, 1978, Universal, Sam Elliott and Catherine Ross.
Love
This
it.
is
Is that where they meet?
yes.
Fuck.
This is a very sexy movie and a good horror movie.
Excuse me. Also, the poster is a cat divided by, and then there's smoke underneath the cat, and then there's an evil hand coming out of the bottom of the cat.
It's a great poster. We have
It's crazy. What is this?
I don't know. Could use a little more Sam Elliott on the poster.
It's a sort of
though.
like isolated, like they're in a little bit of an
And it's
isolated.
Richard Marquand, director of
Yes,
Return of the Jedi.
Jedi. It's just before that. It's a pretty solid movie. And then 1978, the final one on this list, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, United Artists.
Oh,
Great,
sure.
great movie.
Yes, these are
I
kind
have
of
seen most of these films, just to be.
It's also interesting.
Like
a lot of
two-thirds.
these are repeating the same stars. Like you have two
Yes.
Christie movies, you have two Sutherland movies. Like there are high class actors who are dipping their toe into horror and staying there.
yes. Now that is kind of the extent of mainstream studio horror filmmaking between Rosemary's Baby and the release of Halloween.
Right.
So you understand with the list I just read, and we described most of those movies, just how different Halloween.
Right. Nothing that we just
There
talked
is-
about is any
There is
Halloween.
nothing even. A lot of these are supernatural. A lot of these are vaguely sci-fi adjacent, and then there's one other element that unites these that we're going to talk about in a minute.
And they tend to be a little more psychological paranoia based.
They also largely take place in very, as David said, very moneyed,
Very bougie.
very high-class situations. None of these are about children.
No.
These are almost exclusively about adults.
Because I imagine part of the calculation, partly it's that they're based on these books that are often about, but like it's like we're gonna need a Gregory Peck or whoever, right? Like
Yes.
we're gonna need a big serious star to ground
Yeah.
this thing.
But
Because
a lot of them are also about sort of like the threat to the family unit.
Yeah,
like someone who has
sure.
made a proper
100%.
life for
you
themselves.
know, a lot of them are set. I mean, obviously, The Exorcist is DC.
Well, okay,
is
so here's
the,
four of
the
those.
Omen.
Okay,
Yeah, so
four
we're
of
gonna talk about the Mount Rushmore because you're absolutely right. Here's the Mount Rushmore of the four, and again, one of these is just after Halloween. But the whole point of this is trying to contextualize when Halloween comes out. How could this movie be such a big deal? How could it go so far against the current of the genre? So the four movies, Mount Rushmore, right? Rosemary's Baby,
Sure, that's George Washington.
The Exorcist,
Okay, that's Abraham Lincoln.
The Omen,
Okay, that's Teddy Roosevelt.
Amityville Horror,
For some reason, that's Jefferson. I don't know
79.
why.
Yeah, sure.
right.
Now, what's the one thing all four of these movies have in common?
Okay, so sorry, just to go through it again, it's Rosemary, Exorcist, Amityville Horror, and The Omen
Yes.
are the four.
These are the four most successful horror movies of, I know Amityville is 1 year after Halloween, but of this decade.
They're all about having children to some extent. Being a
No.
parent.
Yeah, well, they are, yeah.
That's true. Apart from
But who is-
Amityville,
who is-
but even Amityville
what is the main
It's about
threat in these
it's
movies?
kids.
Ben, you know who I'm talking about. You love this guy.
Wait, what?
The main threat in those four movies.
Oh, it's the
Satan.
devil.
Oh,
Satan.
Satan
Yeah,
himself.
of course.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
Dark Prince.
Whose podcast? Yeah, this
of
is
hell.
This is the
Darkest Podcast.
The Darkest Podcast.
Right.
The four biggest, most successful movies
They're
of
demonic.
this decade. They all are literally about Satan or the
Rosemary's
devil.
Baby. What if Satan fucked your wife and made a baby?
And you
The
let
Omen-
it happen. What if you Bubba the Love
The Omen-
sponged your wife to Satan?
The Omen, what if your kid was the devil?
Yes.
Right.
The Exorcist, what if your kid got infected with the devil?
Right.
Now, the
Amityville, what if you
Amityville
moved into the
Horror
devil's pied to tear?
Is, I guess, the least demonic.
It
but
is,
It's
and-
more
but
of a haunting.
But it's also, for God's sake, get out.
For God's sake, get out.
Right.
But the
And
point
there's
is,
glowing-
it,
there's a
it-
demon pig.
It deals with
there's
the
stuff.
sort of religious sense
sure.
of demonic horror.
I would say also undisputably the trashiest.
Well, I know you don't like Amityville,
I don't hate it. I just feel like it is the one.
and I'm going to explain to you why you think that
okay.
in a minute.
Fair enough.
because
He's getting right in
Amityville-
my head.
There was some episode where you were like, Amityville, that movie's pretty bad, and Anna we were like in the car listening to it, and Anna was like,
and you hit brake, and there was like a 28-car
Anna,
pile up.
I mean, these
Santa
are all
Blues Brothers.
these are all films we love, but she loves Amityville, and
Sure.
she just went, "Oh, come on,"
Wow.
because
I'm
it
so
is.
sorry.
Well, you should rewatch it. It's quite strong. I also recommend visiting.
I
the
should
house.
rewatch it. I should revisit what?
I also recommend visiting the Amityville house.
Over in Amityville.
Right there in
Long Island.
Amityville.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so here's the success of these 4 movies, just to contextualize how much satanic evil people were eating up for this 10 years. Rosemary's Baby, 2 Oscar nominations, 249 adjusted gross.
It wins.
It won
Supporting
Best
Won
Supporting
actress.
Ruth
Actress.
Gordon.
Right.
Should have
Exorcist.
been nominated for more things.
As I already said, 597 million
10
adjusted,
noms.
10 Oscar nominations.
It gets a screenplay win, right? I think is it's
Does
only yeah. Let me look it up.
because Burstyn doesn't win.
Burstyn
had
doesn't
already
win.
won at that point.
No, she wins the next year for
Okay,
Alice, right?
okay, right.
But let's one
Friedkin had
screenplay
won
and
previously.
sound.
Yes,
Okay.
which is
Um,
fair.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a great year, but
The Exorcist is just an insane outlier of success. But it
Well,
makes
it's-
people comfortable with horror, the devil, Satanism, and religious horror.
Well, that's
It's
what I was going
also-
to say. That's what's weird about The Exorcist is that it's almost kind of popular with Christians
Right.
who wouldn't normally be into that kind
They're
of
into
Especially
it,
because
but
it's
it's also so scary
grotesque
to them,
and
right.
explicit. That's the thing. Like you're pushing boundaries with The Exorcist that I
language,
feel like we're beyond.
the gore, the language,
Right.
like
Good
coming out of a
taste
girl's mouth, right?
at that
It's
point in
insane.
time.
Great
Yes.
film. Great
It
film.
is. It's
Okay.
the best. It's so fucking good.
The Omen.
I love it
so
so much.
scary.
It's great.
It's my favorite horror franchise,
And it's one of those
the one
things
I
like
want to do the
Friedkin
most.
he's fucked it up so bad now. Like
Oh sure. Wait.
I feel like a couple of years ago he screened like a Atmos mix DCP, and I know people who saw it and they were like, "It's fucking trash."
Sure.
Like what he has done to this.
I didn't.
is-
He also
love-
did his recoloration of French Connection, where
he's-
he made
he-
it look like Inside Llewyn Davis, and he was like, "It was always supposed to look like
It's-
running
he's-
pastels."
yeah.
I mean,
Well, I liked when he added the going
The spider
down
walk.
the
Yeah,
stairs.
like
the version,
that.
you-
That's
the,
fine.
the
Yeah,
version
as a
you've never
kid.
seen was solid.
was solid, although I still don't prefer it.
No, I
personally.
wouldn't put it on now.
No.
Anyway,
But and then also he made the demented documentary where he talked to like the real exorcist, who's like this 1 million-year-old Italian guy who's like, yes, Harry Potter is the devil, and you're like, what is this movie?
Yeah, you just also
Missed
want to
that one.
constantly like scream at Friedkin like you're Jewish. You're allowed to be interested in this, but just acknowledge it.
He has the vibe of like anyway, he doesn't want to, you know.
Love-
That's what I'm saying.
Right,
I just
yeah,
want to
yeah, yeah.
remind him.
Right.
and also Friedkin's The Keep is The Guardian. Just
Oh,
putting that
sure.
out there.
Well, look,
Friedkin's
Friedkin
Street
is
movie.
the original blank check arc guy, in my opinion. You know, he bankrupts
You've
the
argued
studio
this for a
practically.
while.
You know,
You'll
like,
do him.
He'd be fun.
I'll come
I-
on for The Guardian. I'll go back to my usual lane for that.
Sure.
Okay, The Omen, 277 million
Huge hit.
adjusted, 2 Oscar nominations.
And also, like,
Jerry Goldsmith.
you know, has a song that's like, no, no, no,
Yes.
that was like a charter. Like, it was like on the Billboard charts. What's it called? Ave Santani, right?
like,
the-
but The Omen is. We watched The Omen last Halloween. The Omen is so good. But again, like
I haven't seen The Omen in a long time.
what you have
it's a lot
now
of fun.
is like a stately apartment building, a Washington D.C. like a very like nice middle class house,
Right.
an ambassador's home, and then Amityville Horror, 311 million adjusted. This is not a studio film; it's AIP. 1 Oscar nomination, Lalo Schifrin. But again, these are like that's a big family's house. The Omen is a big family's house. The Exorcist is like a modest family's house. So again, like Halloween is not like these 4 huge movies in any way. Now I feel like the context for what American horror is in 1978, I think is pretty clear.
Right.
But then there's this other parallel thing. Now Halloween, indisputably, probably the first massively influential slasher.
Mainstreams the slasher, sure.
Yes, it mainstreams the slasher. But here's a quick list of other slashers, again, from this era. Carnival of Blood, 1970. Great film.
I've never seen. I've heard of it. Great title,
Yes.
obviously. I mean,
Silent
hard
Night,
to argue
Bloody
with
Night,
that.
1972, which is really early. And this is a very straight down the middle slasher. It's also just so lurid and sick and like not at all comfortable. It's a Christmas horror movie. Last House on the Left, 1972.
Does that count as a slasher?
No, it's in there.
It's so scary.
Obviously,
Well, that movie is very disturbing.
obviously,
Oh
if
my
you're talking
God.
rape revenge,
Right. I think of that as a rape
And it is
revenge, and of course,
a
it's a
remake of The
remake of an
Virgin
Ingmar
Spring.
Bergman movie, right?
but nevertheless, you can't not mention that as the sort of Wes
Just
Craven.
in terms of also a movie that is being presented to audiences is like, do you dare experience this?
Right.
Absolutely. But
You're
also,
going to faint. You're
kind
going
of
to
a
vomit.
you know, 72 is early for that. Like
It
that
is. I mean, that movie is so distressing because it doesn't feel like Hollywood has even touched it at all.
That's the
right?
other thing,
Yeah.
is that what I'm trying to
It's too
now
real.
establish is that we talked about these 4 huge Oscar-nominated mainstream hits, and then there's, throughout all of this concurrent genre trajectory of these other films that are so gross and violent and dirty and nasty.
And this is pre-video, so it's like you have to go to a theater and have this sort of crazy experience.
And these movies play
Right.
for 2 years.
Right.
And like William Castle movies were like selling this, like, people are gonna fucking faint, you won't
Right.
believe it, and then you watch the movie.
There's a
and it's
nurse.
like,
There's a nurse
And
in
it's
the
like a
lobby.
spider dangling.
right, exactly. That was, right, they were all about the sort of like carnival barker theatrics of like people are losing their minds.
You
blood is
have to
pouring
sign
out
a
there.
waiver to get into the theater.
We have a doctor conducting evaluations.
Did you
Just
did you
to be
see when
clear.
Film Forum did the William Castle series like 10 years ago
Yes.
when they
I
did all
remember
the
that.
gimmicks?
Yes, it was
with
so
the
good.
skeleton flying over the
Yes.
audience, and you signed. It was a blast.
We are not exaggerating here. This was part of his genius. Was like he would hire actors to be nurses outside with stretchers, and they'd be like, "This last screening was a rough one. People are signing waivers. There's
And one
things
day
floating in the theater."
We'll
But
do
what-
matinee. We'll do Joe Dante.
Yeah,
one
Matinee,
day.
Fucking love
Matinee,
the
big,
Joe Dante, John
homage
Goodman movie
to
is
William
just like
Castle.
Incredible.
1-to-1 a William Castle tribute.
But yes, that's the whole phenomenon, and people are buying into it. But in terms of what's actually being depicted on screen, versus when you get to things like Last House on the Left, where it's like, we're not
rattling.
fucking around here. You're gonna see shit that's gonna upset.
Right, it's
you.
like this movie looks like it looks kind of like a documentary
Right,
because
that's the
there's no
thing.
production value.
Right.
It's 10 minutes of someone being raped and
It's no
70
actors you
minutes of
recognize.
people
Right.
avenging that rape.
Right.
But
And
like quietly, and the music is just kind of like this weird occasional jangle, and
Yeah.
you're just, it's so
Can't look
creepy.
away.
Yes.
It's when these films start to feel a little like snuff
yeah,
films
it's very,
versus
and
something like
they're
Exorcist
They're
that's
nasty.
pushing
They're
the limit.
illicit.
But yes.
They're dangerous. And this is where Halloween. This is the paving. Like, this is where Halloween can land in a few years. 74, Black Christmas, the
big boy.
huge influential film. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Deranged, which is also based on Ed Gein, as Texas Chainsaw Massacre is. It's by far the most disgusting version of the Ed Gein story. I love Deranged. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, top 10 film all time for me.
Obviously the best.
Yes, it is. It is just the one for me. But again, like, and we'll talk about this in terms of the slasher and Halloween, but like Texas Chainsaw Massacre takes place nowhere. You don't need to be afraid of that happening to you unless you happen to be.
Texas
I don't
Chainsaw
know.
Massacre, you are definitely like, why don't these kids maybe
Right.
hang a left and hit the
There's
highway?
that turn back.
If your
you
car
idiots
breaks down
kind
in the middle of
right.
nowhere, you're in danger. This does not bring the threat into your home, which is one of the things I
that's
want to start mentioning.
so perfect
Halloween
about Halloween.
does that. None of these movies do that. Black Christmas kind of, but again, like
No, but Black Christmas is a weird ass movie. I mean, it rules.
it's very solid.
But it's set obviously in a sorority house, and you don't know who the killer is at all.
No, not
and
even
you
at the
never
end.
understand any iota of the killer's
It's not
motivation.
about a killer. It's about people who are being picked off.
Right. And I mean, again, it's very atmospheric, but it almost feels like someone's just kind of telling you a creepy story.
Yes, it's much more of a fable.
Right.
In like the sort, it's like an urban legend, is what I mean.
Right, like
the final two I want to mention: Shivers, Cronenberg. You have to just acknowledge that he's starting to do things at this time that are incredibly valuable to the genre.
Shivers is the one that's set in the high rise.
Yes.
That,
And it's a
that
sort of an
movie is
infection
great.
breaks out. Again, not a slasher, more of a zombie adjacent movie. 76, this is a slasher. Alice, Sweet Alice. Great
Never
film.
seen that.
Iconic. Young Brooke Shields, the great yellow raincoat with the mask imagery. A very, very solid film that is a true blue slasher.
Okay.
And I don't want this, we're not going to get into this, but you can't not mention that throughout the 70s, you also have Argento.
Sure.
Just to
Well,
mention
that's
what
the
else,
thing.
what else is happening at this time.
Right, we
Bird with the
mentioned
Crystal
that-
Plumage, 1970. Deep Red, 75. Suspiria, 77.
We mentioned that on the Griff on the Precinct 13 episode, right? Yeah,
Yes.
obviously that's a cousin to the slasher movie,
Right.
is the Shallow movie.
So
Yeah.
like, again, like those movies would have been playing. These are in the culture that then makes room for Halloween. But like, these are all independent. These are independent films. These are made by people with whatever resources they have. And these 4 things I just want to quickly mention are not slashers at all. But the other big bang, the reason I start 1968, is Night of the Living Dead. That and Rosemary's Baby begin a 10-year trajectory that by 1978 allow Halloween to exist. Where it's just
in terms of how they're being made?
Just how they're being made, how they're being marketed, drive-in, double bills, grindhouse, exploitation. And then they just like play forever and make tens of millions of dollars. Blood Freak, 1972, is a movie about a guy who turns into a chicken.
Cool.
1972, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. This is Bob Clark, who made Black Christmas.
Another all-time great title.
Kind of a zombie movie as well. The 1973, Messiah of Evil, which is a zombie movie made by Willard Huck and Gloria Katz, who then did Howard the Duck.
Right. And co-wrote
American Graffiti.
Right.
Yes, they're Lucas people. Later, Messiah of Evil is just a totally low-budget, gnarly zombie film that I have a huge amount of affinity for. And this is where Halloween, this is what's important for Halloween, right? Like, I've always said this. I've said this since I was in film school.
He's always said this.
People,
always said that.
You've heard me say that. I said this about Verhoeven. I said this about Christopher Nolan.
all the way back to when you were in film school.
The history of independent film, right? If you look at the canon, they're like, here's independent film. You have Cassavetes. You have these things. It's like, no, the history of independent film is these movies. Right. The history of independent film is some huckster being like, I can raise $100,000 from my community to make a movie at the carnival that we have, and we can make a horror movie at the carnival, and we'll make $1 million. That's the history of independent film. And everything I've just listed is proof of that to a T, as is ultimately Halloween, where it's like genre cinema, horror, exploitation, pornography, all of these things are independent film that they don't tell you are independent films, which is weird because everyone's like, Halloween, independent film.
Right, sure. But later they're like that. But right at the but like but it's just like, guess what's playing this weekend? That movie you've heard about that's so scary. Like,
do you think part of that, Alex, is a framing of like, well, Halloween was independent film, but then Carpenter went on to do studio things, and the sequels were studios, and so it made good. Whereas they want to keep, like in film schools, right, the idea of American independent film as being this sort of like elite, classy thing.
Sure.
So it either has to lead
by the
to
Sundance Film Festival
mainstream respectability, or it has to lead to like critical respectability.
It wouldn't behoove any film professor to be like, look, you're all going to make independent films, so I'm going to show you a bunch of 70s New York pornography and a bunch of horror films made by people who live in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm going to explain to you what $50,000 got you then, and what you would be chased out of town. Yeah, because that is not the official canon. But if you want to, like, when I was starting to discover these films, I was like, the use of negative space and maximizing your limitations in these films is so much more useful to me than watching Stranger Than Paradise. Sure, because these movies, like, they have nothing, and they're good.
They are,
and they're made on a shoestring. Like, you know, you have like Carnival of Souls, which I love, and like
one of my favorite movies.
Just like a movie that some guy made.
There's also a viable career path being presented versus like, or you can bet that you are the 1 in a million guy who becomes Jim Jarmusch. Yeah, because everyone comes out of film school being like, but I'm Jim Jarmusch, right?
But I mean, like, Carnival of Souls is one of those special things where you're like, well, what else did this guy make? And it's like,
not
he didn't
industrial
make anything
films,
else.
yes.
Right, yeah, exactly. He made instructional movies.
But as did Romero.
Right. But then, but like, it's like Carnival of Souls is so beautiful, and it has like one of the most incredible like edits I've ever seen. You know what I mean? And you're like, how did this guy?
But then the other side of that is a movie like Manos: The Hands of Fate, which like is
famous
a mystery science theater staple, where it's just like, not everybody who's like, I begged my dentist for 10 grand, and I begged my lawyer for 10 grand, and I'm going to make a horror picture. Not everybody can turn that into gold.
No. Sure.
But certainly a lot more people tried than anybody thinks.
But also, like, that movie has more of a life, even if it's only for being bad, than the indie drama equivalent of that.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
Even if it's only as an object of fascination, these shoestring movies do have a more viable life than any other genre produced on that sort of budget.
And because people who love the genre can look at them and see value in them. You can see some creativity because of how little you have. And there's so much of that in Halloween that we will soon be going over. But like, it's just, so basically up until this point, this is what the genre is, right? This is a mainstream and independent sense of horror as a way of understanding when John Carpenter makes this movie about a guy who kills babysitters, how fucking revolutionary this thing can seem, because what you have is movies about rich people who are families dealing with Satan, or movies about people in weird ass rural locations being killed by zombies, mutated chickens,
Right.
Leatherface,
Monsters.
what have you, monsters.
It's terrible things happening to good, morally upstanding people, or it's dumb idiots make a series of bad
Punishments.
mistakes and
Yeah.
get
Right.
what was coming to
Or
them.
like,
Right.
you know, in the Messiah of Evil Shivers, it's like, or there's just like some sort of disease,
Mm-hmm.
Night of the Living Dead. Like Night of the Living Dead obviously has so much influence in this way. But okay, so like now zeroing in, getting closer to Michael Myers. Okay, so your fourth slasher mount.
You don't want to get too close to that guy. That guy
Not
is
that
Yeah, please.
fucking
The knife's
scary.
long.
So there's another Mount Rushmore here, which is the slasher mascot Mount Rushmore,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like is a Mount Rushmore Ben probably visits, right? You got your four guys on it. You got Leatherface,
Yeah.
74, Michael Myers, 78,
Mm-hmm.
Jason, 80, and Freddy, 84. Right? Those are the four.
Yeah.
Those are the guys.
Yeah.
The big four.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anyone who can really challenge.
No,
I
no,
mean,
those are the
no.
four.
But there's a little stone Chucky who's like running behind the mountain.
But Chucky, he
He's little,
strays
he's little, he's
from
little.
slashing.
I'm
He's not
mostly
I
making
think
a
he's
joke
I
about
think
him
Chucky
being
works at
little.
the gift shop. I don't think
Right.
Chucky works at
Yeah.
the gift shop. Fine.
I don't think they
Right.
put Chucky on the map.
I just want to say, let's not act like he's not a knife guy. I'm
No,
not
he definitely does
arguing
nice
for his
it's just that
inclusion.
halfway into his series, he's like, you know what? I mostly do bits.
But you know what? But you
Why
know,
I like him.
but you know who starts off doing bits is
Freddy.
Freddy Krueger. He's like,
Although he's less bit heavy in the first Nightmare.
Yes.
He's mostly just a scary
My
character.
number one.
looking at these four franchises, of which Halloween is arguably one of the best.
Yeah, and is also the earliest franchise, right? Because the second Texas Chainsaw
Yes,
takes
exactly.
a while.
This
to
is very
happen.
important.
Right.
So
Yeah.
for the four above ground horror movies, and then for these to a different
Okay, so
extent,
this is the
how
sequel
much
section. Sure.
the legacy of these things is connected to what becomes of these franchises.
Right.
Right. So like Rosemary's Baby has a made-for-TV movie. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But Rosemary's Baby is almost seen, and you can see this from the fact that it's the only one of those that no one has just like straight up remade.
Right.
It's almost seen as like, it's just one of those things you don't go back to.
They did the fucking NBC version a couple years ago that also everyone was like, we're
Zoe
just going to
Saldana.
ignore this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
So
but
let's
it's
not talk about
It's
this.
one
Right.
of those things like Jaws where it's just like Hollywood's just,
It's a
you're
little
just not going to do Rosemary's Baby.
Sacrosanct.
again.
Yeah.
So Exorcist 2 comes out in 77. That's pretty soon.
Right. Heretic.
Amityville 2 is 82. Now, this is a $12 million gross, 32 adjusted, down from 86.
So a huge dive. No
Right.
one
Yes.
wanted to go back
And
to the
Omen
house.
2 is 78.
Right.
And so, like, David, you're talking like Amityville that has like a dodgy reputation. It's because that movie goes from like a B plus movie. I love Amityville 2. Everyone who loves horror,
Amityville 2 is a prequel, right? It's
Yeah.
the one. It's about the
Yes,
original
and it
murder.
is made by an Italian filmmaker whose name is escaping me.
It's Damiano Damiani.
Yes, of course.
Wow.
Sounds fake.
And
Straight
it
to
is-
here. I'm seeing by
It is
Waluigi.
just like it's just
wait a second.
it is a sick movie. Like it is a sick movie
It's- I
made.
gotta say, yeah, it sounds kind of nasty.
It is a genuinely depraved movie, but it's the one that like horror fans are like Amityville 2
Yeah.
is a masterpiece. But nobody in the mainstream.
But
said
this is
that.
what I'm talking about, where you're like, okay, what about the Hellraisers? And they're like, everyone's like, well, we all know 5 and 6 were a huge rebound, and I'm like, we all do? Like, really?
We all
I have to
know.
watch 5 and 6 now.
We all know that Amityville 2 is beloved.
Right.
But like it takes the franchise from like
Sure.
respectability straight into the grindhouse. Like it is no longer a mainstream thing. It is now
right.
it is now filth.
Well, then I'm aware that I'm aware of Amityville 3 because it was 3D, like many a 3.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fine. It has Meg Ryan in
But it also has the poster where it looks like a dinosaur hand is coming out
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
house. And
It's
you're
like
like,
a-
wait, what happened to this franchise?
It's like a goblin hand.
Don't you think also Amityville has a problem in that, like,
People keep moving into the same house, and you're
well,
like,
that's
come
an
on.
issue.
Like,
The realtor should warn people.
have you heard about the horror?
Yeah. Have you seen this fucking
It's
movie?
impossible to not just think of the Simpsons thing with the murder house when
Yes.
Marge is selling real estate. But anyway,
my question was, so obviously the horror icon becomes crystallized later in sort of the Mount Rushmore that you established,
Yes.
right? But it does help that like Rosemary's Baby, Exorcist, and The Omen all have, at least, even if only in brief glimpses, some kind of physicalization of Satan, where you can, in theory, continue it and go like,
Yes.
I understand what the central fear is, whereas Amityville's a little more abstract, so you can make a sequel that pleases hardcore horror fans, but like passive viewers are just like, I don't know what the thing is anymore.
yes.
You know?
For sure. Well, that's like, so Omen remains classy. Omen is like
Sure.
Damien lives in the circles of society. Of
Right.
course, we all know Damien is evil.
That helps them, that they had like a physicalization that was
Exorcist
very
does the
clean.
same thing with
3
Reagan.
is the one with Sam Neill. in
Yes,
the
where
Omen?
he's like
where he's
the
like
president.
the president, or he's going to be the
Damien?
president or whatever.
Yeah, Damien
The
the
Omen
Omen
3?
3.
Okay.
And then Exorcist similarly tries to remain pretty classy for 2. 3 is, of course, gonzo and great.
Right.
But Amityville just immediately becomes something closer to the independent films, right?
Sure.
Like
Right.
Amityville
It
does
just,
not try to...
like you said, just goes right into the trash.
Yeah,
right.
instantly.
Yeah.
So like that's why those originals, that's why those are still like A-level films, and Amityville is an A-level film.
Right.
But like with slashers, they don't go from A to C plus. They go from like B to B minus,
Right.
or from B to B plus even. So that's why like these 4 slasher things, like they become franchises with 7 or 8 movies, most of which are solid.
Texas Chainsaw is the one that's not
That's
quite
too gonzo, yeah.
right, because all the sequels to that are weird.
Well, 3 is when New Line is like, we're gonna make Leatherface like
Right.
one of our slasher guys, like Freddy or Jason. And 3, I always was like, I love 3. I haven't seen it in years. I saw a print of it at Alamo a few years ago, and I was like, oh, this movie's not that good. I've always
Yeah,
said
well,
this one was great.
And then 4 is the one with Renee Zellweger and Matthew
Yeah, the new
McConaughey.
generation,
Right.
the next
Yeah.
generation.
And 2 feels a little like Gremlins 2, where
Yes,
it's just
very
like
much so.
a little
But it's
bit.
also like 12 years later.
That's the thing.
I
It's
have it
like they
written down
waited too
somewhere.
long. The director's sort of like, if I'm going to do this again, I'm not going to do the same movie again. And they made something a lot weirder that people didn't really,
Yes,
click
Okay,
with.
so like basically this is what I'm trying to say about sequels, and Halloween certainly pertains to this. Like you can make a great slasher and you can make a so-so sequel and it's fine. You can also make a so-so slasher and then make a good sequel, and you can then make 6 more.
Right.
And the other thing that has to be mentioned, 1978, is Dawn of the Dead, which is the first sequel that people are like, that's better. Like,
Sure.
that's just undeniably
Period.
better.
Right.
But it's
he,
also
he had more money. He improved on it. The
it's-
sort of
it's-
Evil Dead. It's
but that's,
many years
that's
later,
another reason that I
obviously,
wanted to talk about 68 to 78, because
Right.
it's sort of the night to dawn
Right.
era. But like, okay, so there's 2 modes you can work in here. And like something in Halloween, we'll talk about this, like Friday the 13th part 2 is like the one people think they remember.
Right.
In the way that there's stuff in Halloween, there's stuff not in Halloween that people think is in Halloween,
Because of the sequels.
just because of the legacy of the franchise.
Sure.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Halloween. Also, they mess with the TV cut of it.
Well, we'll talk about the TV
Yeah,
cut.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
yeah.
so this is what's interesting about, so all of those
But
those
with Friday the 13th, the first 3 movies are what people think of as the
Yes.
first movie.
But, like-
Because they all are the same movie with improvements,
Yes.
and they're all doing the exact same
So-
format. Yeah.
But you see how those 4 Oscar-nominated films do not become viable franchises,
No,
and then all
sure,
4
right.
of these slasher mascots spawn these
Never-ending
rabid franchises. Because Friday the
franchises,
13th
right.
Part
Right.
2 is quite solid.
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 obviously has its fans, but it does. There's no reason to make 8 Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels. Obviously, it's been rebooted. Texas Chainsaw is a superior film to Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
But they nailed the sequel so hard that they could then go up to space.
I mean, Friday the 13th as well is like, that's a Paramount film.
Yeah.
That's a studio film. And that's the studio being like, wait a second, we could do one of these a year for nothing and make a ton of money.
Yes.
And they just make a little farmhouse on the set, like on the studio lot. And they tell like Sean Cunningham and what's his pants, like, yeah, just one a year.
Yeah.
And it's either the 4th or the 5th. I think it's the 5th where the producer is like, we fucking made a porno in the woods. Like, where he was like, really no one was paying attention to us at a certain point.
Jeez.
And there's sort of at that point, like the studio's like, wait a second, what is this shit? Like, but for a while it's just, it's
it becomes
profit.
this well-oiled machine that becomes a viable franchise. And like,
Yes.
but okay, so this is all to say, what does Halloween do differently than these films? Why is Halloween so different and special, even though it comes before Friday the 13th? And it like, so we need to talk about that. But like, it's okay. The Final Girl, Black Christmas, proto slasher. There's a lot of people in that movie. Olivia Hussey.
There's no final girl,
No.
right? Yeah.
Obviously,
there's no
this
main
is-
character, really.
Obviously,
Yeah.
this is one of the innovations that Halloween is credited with, even though it's in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Sure.
There's
That's true.
Sally riding
Final
away,
shot, her face,
riding away at the end.
right?
But so you can't say that Halloween invented that. But what you can say is that none of these movies take place like on the suburban street
Right.
that everybody lives on. That everybody is like.
That's why this is the best movie ever made.
That's the thing here. Is that my point now that I've arrived at it is that everything we've talked about for this entire decade either is ignored for Halloween to innovate its own things, or Halloween plays with the things that have been done but does them better. Now I'm basically ready to like talk about Carpenter.
David.
Yeah.
I've heard about The Shape.
You've heard about The Shape, the villain
But
of...
The Grid?
So The Shape, as we know, is how Michael Myers is billed in the Halloween film, the first
The
one.
Shape.
He's
Yes.
The Shape. He, you don't know where he's
mysterious.
coming. Right.
Yeah.
Very mysterious. Now, what's this Grid? Is this also mysterious?
Well, The Shape, he's hidden under a mask, right?
Sure. Right.
He
Don't know
brings
who
terror
is.
into our life. He's
Mhm.
an unwelcomed visitor in our home. The Grid is quite the opposite, although is hidden perhaps under a mattress cover.
That's true. You can hide the Grid,
You can't hide the Grid,
but
you want it in your home.
well, right, because you're going to sleep cool and comfortable. Because we're talking about purple mattresses.
We're
okay?
talking about purple mattresses, of course.
I don't know about you, Griff, but it's been a warm couple of weeks in New York City.
Yep.
And only purple mattresses have the Grid, which is a unique ventilated design that lets air flow through to help you sleep cool, even when it feels 1,000 degrees out. Now, to me, that's hyperbole. It didn't feel like 1,000 degrees, but it felt like 100 degrees, maybe.
999.
And the Grid is amazingly supportive for your back and your legs. It cushions your shoulders, neck, and hips, no matter how you sleep. Griff, I know you've got a bad back. I don't want
Got a
to
bad back.
tell tales out of school.
No, that's a tale in school. I got a bad back. And I would say this mattress is even more supportive than Dr. Loomis.
Oh, well, yeah, that guy, that guy isn't exactly the most caring doctor I've ever met. I didn't meet him, but I've ever seen.
I don't know. He's pretty committed to his patients, if you look at it from that perspective.
Yes, he's definitely singularly focused. Look, much like Dr. Loomis, the Grid bounces back as you move and shift. I don't know if that's really like Dr. Loomis. Maybe he's actually... Dr. Loomis is kind of like memory foam. He remembers everything.
He remembers everything.
But the Grid bounces back, right? So you don't have that I'm stuck feeling that you can get on a memory foam mattress where it sort of like makes an imprint and that you just sort of sink into it.
I mean, unfortunately, that makes the Grid kind of like Michael Myers because you think he's dead and then he bounces back every movie.
Well, he's the star. And the purple
He is the
mattresses are the stars. Okay? It's this crazy squishy thing. Griff and I have both been sent this product. It's unlike any other mattress material I've ever felt.
It's fun to touch.
It is fun to touch, but if you're looking for something that's cooler and not as, sort of not like the memory foam thing where you just kind of get stuck in it, you can try your purple mattress risk-free with free shipping and returns, and financing is available too. I'm going to call to action, Griff. Do it. Purple is comfort reinvented. Right now, you get 10% off any order of $200 or more. Go to purple.com/check10 and use promo code check10. That's purple.com/check10, promo code check10 for 10% off any order of $200 or more. Purple.com/check10, promo code check10. Terms apply. And they got mattresses, they got pillows, $200, and you're going to get 10% off. They got a bed frame, I think. It's pretty cool.
I've been like idly working on this since April, what I just went through.
Yeah, we know. And you've been giving us updates. You've been sort of warning us.
Because occasionally
for
I'll
months.
watch something else that will change something at some point I need to make.
Yes.
But also recently I've just been watching lots of Carpenter movies. But it is like, okay, obviously this is incredibly detailed and specific and the kind of deep dive into context that only certain people can wrap their heads around.
Some real nerdy shit.
But
one
the
would
thing
say.
about Halloween is that it's just like a absurdly simple movie. And
It sure is.
if you haven't seen it before, which somebody might be coming to it for the first time for this series, or if you haven't seen it in a while, it is almost impossible to watch it and be like, oh, I understand why this movie is the most, I understand why this is still the slasher movie against which all others are measured. Because you look at it and you're like, this is just like a good movie.
That's the way I saw it when I was 15. Is I watched it and I was like, that's good. That's the whole thing. Like I had no complaints about it, but I also was like, that like sent like seismic shockwaves across the industry.
The metaphor I'm going to make is like, it's kind of like when like I feel like you would get into like punk and people are like, you got to check out Hawkwind, like proto-punk. And then you listen to it and you're like, I don't know, it's okay.
Maybe I had to be there.
Yeah, like I don't know, this is fine.
Yeah.
Sure, but it's right. It's like showing someone Casablanca and they're like, well, this is corny. They're saying all this like corny stuff to each other. And I'm like, no. They like no one was saying corny stuff yet, right? Like or whatever. Like, but anyway.
But it is like the whole thing I was trying to wrap my head around for months, culminating in watching Halloween last night, is like how can you possibly understand what a big deal this movie was?
Sure.
This movie that cost nothing. This movie that has no production value beyond its Steadicam and its music.
Right. Its big star is Donald Pleasant.
Yes. And like, how can you explain to somebody, even someone who loves the movie and loves Carpenter, this is the 10-year runway that this movie landed on. And
sure.
now 40 years later, you can just copy Halloween and still make a pretty good movie. Why is that?
Right. There's a very small selection of movies where you could do a direct sequel 40 years later and have it feel that big.
Yes.
You know, like not only is everyone still ripping off Halloween, but the idea of like, fuck, we're doing Halloween again.
But I think Alex's point is interesting and true, which is like, if I tomorrow was like, I'm going to make a movie called, Arbor Day. What's the plot? A guy kills some people.
Right.
He gets out of prison and he kills some people.
Yeah.
People would be like, I'm excited to see that.
Yes.
That's the kind of movie I like to see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What
Like, there's just
trees? We cutting trees
forget
down?
it. It's called
Right.
fucking Tuesday. And it's
Right.
like, well, this guy got out of prison and he's going to stab 8 people.
I mean, look, I like Tuesday. I think there's some potential there.
Put it on the
Ben's
blank
onto
check picture
something
slate.
good
All right,
is
Ben's
here
now taking
too.
it to a tree
Arbor Day.
zone.
No, Arbor Day. It's like he's
You know
got
what's good
one of
about
those
Tuesdays,
fucking.
though? You have 6 sequels ready to go.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
Tuesday
You're
2,
saying
Wednesday.
Tuesday 3 Monday is the prequel.
yeah, right. Tuesday 0. Yeah.
No, but I like
Tuesday Origins.
I like the,
Oh my god.
I like the Arbor Day idea where like
He's got like some garden shears or whatever.
no, he's got like in Gordon Green's Joe, they have that axe that's like filled with the acid that they use to like kill trees, and he's like an environmental activist who got like thrown in jail for chaining himself to a tree that was going to get bulldozed, and he comes out and he starts chopping people down.
But that's what I'm trying to say is you guys are putting gimmicks on it, which is fine, and people have done that.
You're
for
saying
40
you could
I'm
just
saying
do
I could
Tuesday.
just pitch Halloween to someone, and they'd be like, "Yeah, that's the kind of movie that still gets made,
Right.
and people still pay money to see."
And it's still viable. Well, that's the thing. Like, the thing about this that I love, right? Like, there are, I would say, many people, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, who every single Halloween will put on Halloween,
Sure.
right? And you have to
Which was, of course, the idea behind calling it Halloween.
obviously,
Right.
and this has paid off for 40 years with now a
Yeah.
$200 million sequel. But this is a genre where all of the films I listed, except for the Oscar-winning ones, right? Like, the canon of horror is shaped entirely by fans, right? Some of these movies had positive critical appraisal at the time. Certainly, there's your Pauline Kael, De Palma. But by and large, if a movie like Halloween becomes a classic, or Friday the 13th, it is because the fans are like, this is a classic.
Yes.
We are going to claim ownership of this from the people who made it. And we have decided canonically that this is one of the great films. And we, as a community of people who love the genre, are in control of film history for this genre in a way that, like, foreign film fans are not.
And horror
Art house film
conventions and graphic tees and
Of
all
course.
these things like
Fangoria and
right, but these are things that now kind of all at fandom at large resembles, and it's like the modern
But
Comic-Con
horror is
is
early,
so much
right.
more indebted to horror cons than it is to what Comic-Con used to be, which was a place to buy comic
Yes,
books.
it's hand in hand with sci-fi in that
Right,
way,
right.
which is a subculture that consumes and owns its thing. The difference
Yeah.
is it's cheaper and easier to make,
And
So
I think
it's
there-
more accessible.
I think there's that
Right.
horror thing too that is unique within the genre of just like people getting elevated to being legendary status.
yes.
You know, where it's like you are a megastar within this bubble.
But also right, that totally weird thing is like, who's that 6'8" guy who looks like he had a stroke? And it's
Right.
like, that guy's Leatherface in the third
Right.
Leatherface.
But
Like,
also
what are you
sometimes they're
fucking
like,
talking about?
don't you know who that guy is? He played the cop in 4 disparate horror movies who
Right.
doesn't catch the guy in time.
But this is the thing, like, people who love that and will line up for an autograph,
Yes.
like, these are the people, of which I am one. Like, no one who loves the movies, the horror movies, has not seen Halloween. And they
Right,
can watch it
right.
every 12 months.
Yeah.
So then it becomes this question of, why watch something that you know forwards and backwards?
Sure.
Why have I watched Star Wars every day I've been 6 since I was 13 years old?
Sure.
Why, like, that's my first thing I do when I'm, so why watch something, but it's not a mythology. It's just designed to titillate teenagers for
Yeah.
one night
Right.
of sex and violence. Why watch these movies 50 times? And that's the sort of like consumer swallowing the product that horror is, and like
Sure.
they just, it's not about it. As I was saying earlier, it is, I need to see everything. I need to watch it all, but it's also like, I just also need to, on a loop, be rewatching everything else. So like there is, you could screen Halloween or The Thing or these Carpenter movies, it'll be sold out.
Yeah.
People will always line up
mean-
to just experience these perfectly made films.
You and I went to see Guns N' Roses in concert in New Jersey the other
did.
night.
First concert in 17 months.
I mean, I was doing the math on it. It's my first concert I've gone to in at least 4 years, I think.
Oh wow.
That's a long time.
I believe.
Well, it set the bar very high.
Yeah, I don't go to concerts very often. I don't like standing.
Well, we had seats.
Thank God. Thank God. But we had a long conversation in the car ride back, and you were sort of comparing the horror community to Kiss.
Heavy to metal and rock.
Sure,
really,
but you were
yes.
using Kiss as sort of like a perfect distillation of the thing.
Yes.
Where it's just like this bizarre feedback loop between the fans and the band that have always been successful but have never been respected as high art. They've never been canonized as one of like the cool groups. There's like a rabid sort of hunger for consuming this stuff over and over again, repackaging it, revisiting it, merchandising it out the wazoo.
Much like horror, especially
Right.
something like Halloween, a band like that could say to their fans, what do you want to buy? And
Right.
they would say, what do you have?
Anything.
Right.
If
Right.
it can say, as Gene Simmons says, if it can say Kiss on it, it should
Right.
say Kiss on it. If it can say Halloween on it, it will say Halloween on it.
I just think it's interesting.
And they can be
Yeah.
in the Library of Congress
Yeah.
or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but it doesn't mean that John Carpenter is going to get an honorary Oscar.
Right.
Or that people are going to be like, legitimately, as cinema, as we like to protect it, we're letting this one in. They can
Sure.
be like, yeah, that's a great slasher, which is a genre of horror.
Right.
Is
But
John
it's-
Carpenter going to get an honorary? I feel
that
like
would
he
be cool.
will.
He could.
Should
I feel like
fucking
he probably
happen.
will.
Yeah. Especially now that they do like
that is
6
a-
a year,
Yeah,
they
I feel
should
like
give
they're,
him one.
and also it's just like they're starting to branch
I
into
bet-
stuff.
Yeah.
Like
He's on a long list.
right.
Yeah.
But that would be insane. As someone
It
who
would
was just
in
like-
terms. It would represent the grand arc of these things.
Right.
it certainly
yeah.
would.
Right.
Peel
that
getting
happens,
a
let's
screenplay
point out
Oscar
that we-
kind of comes from. It feels like some full circle moment
Yeah,
of like
right,
we
right.
should
Get
go
out
back,
having a
and
seal of
fucking-
legitimacy to
right.
it.
That
or
is,
whatever.
well,
right.
yeah, it's a movie that just quotes Halloween.
Right, but that's what I'm
constantly.
saying. Like it feels like them being like, "Fuck, we should pay some respect to John."
Well, it's just one of those things where you can look back at 1978 and be like, yeah, like the score of this, like Halloween should have won an Oscar for score. I don't know what won in
Right.
70 or should have been nominated
Right.
at least.
I think. You see, the thing is, I checked my best score, 1979.
I hope you checked it to put Halloween on it.
No, Halloween was on.
Oh,
it.
good,
I was
good.
checking my ballot, and I saw it's not the winner. I have Days of Heaven, Ennio Morricone's famous score.
For any of the listeners who don't know, David has a how far back does it go?
Goes back to 1928.
Oh my god.
David has a spreadsheet in 1928 what he would give the Oscar to in every category and what the 5 nominees would be.
And some people think like, oh, it's just the main. No, I got original score there. But is that wrong? I have to now. And I was sort of shaken because I was like, obviously, I must have Carpenter winning score here, and I don't. Days of Heaven, obviously,
I can't picture it right now.
it's a
and I've
tremendous
seen the
score.
movie.
But
Oh,
you can't-
I could sing all of it.
I mean, but like,
I could sing. I could book a venue. I could go to Carnegie Hall and sing all of the Days of Heaven score.
I mean, the Halloween theme obviously
Well,
is
once
designed to stick
all
in your head.
COVID problems are gone, that can be a Patreon bonus tier.
That'll be a Patreon.
This
tier.
is
Griffin
also-
Newman one night at Carnegie Hall singing the Days of Heaven score live to the film.
That'll be great.
Wordless Music Orchestra presents Griffin Newman's.
But I mean, this is also the year of John Williams' Superman score.
See, that's a good score.
A great score.
Good score.
Also, his score
Yeah.
for The Fury, which is a great score.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good scores.
But you're exactly this is what we were saying in the car when we were trying to find a tunnel back from New Jersey to New York. Fruitlessly, is like the sort of disreputability.
Right.
That's not a word. What's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know. Keep going.
The disreputable nature of things like rock and roll or heavy metal or horror.
Right.
And then the sort of 50-year arc of these, or 40 or 30-year arc of bands that are regarded like punk metal bands, loud, vulgar trash, as these movies all could have been. And then 40 years later, it's like, Well, Iron Maiden sell out 2 shows at Barclays Center every 2 years. That's 70,000 people buying a ticket to a band that has never had a mainstream crossover. And it's like, and Halloween, you can reboot it and it makes $200 million, or you can repackage and people will buy the new Blu-ray, the new box set. Like these fans, they belong to the things they love, and the things they love belong to them. But also, and this this 90 minutes is just like this perfect object.
But also that they create industries in this certain way where you're like, maybe I'm speaking out of my ass here, but like graphic tees of things from pop culture are things that children wear to bed, right?
Sure.
I do feel like adults wearing TV shows of the T-shirts of the media they like is a thing that really gets pushed through by horror fans.
Is wearing a Orko T-shirt.
I'm wearing an Orko T-shirt.
And I'm wearing
Halloween Horror-thon.
And I'm wearing
Hello Fennel.
Hello
shirt.
Fennel.
Yeah.
But do we recognize this guy talking about sequels?
Let me see. Turn to me.
Is the creature from the Black Lagoon.
No. This is one of the Halloween costumes from Halloween 3 season of the
Oh,
Witch.
it is, of course.
Yes.
Shit, that's right.
Wow.
To be fair, it looks a little like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
No, it doesn't. David's stupid. I get the point.
Creature from
do.
the Black Lagoon.
I think he's green.
Well, he's green.
Yeah, green guy, red eyes.
Well, so is Oscar the Grouch.
He doesn't have red eyes.
Well, I started saying this before you said the red eyes.
He doesn't have a hood on, but
Conventions based around appearances,
Yes.
right, is a thing that really formulates from the horror community, and the demand of we want to meet these people who otherwise would never be recognized in their grocery store. We'll now line up for hours to meet them for 5
$40
seconds.
autographs.
Right.
The Kane Hodder-ification of... go
not
on, sir.
just that Fangoria existed, but that modern fan journalism, if we can call it that, is closer in tone to Fangoria than things like Variety and Hollywood Reporter.
Absolutely.
Right? And even the tone of shit like Deadline or whatever is closer to Fangoria, I feel
Absolutely.
like, by and large. Then you're also looking at shit like the endless re-releases, repackagings of home video releases.
Well,
across
there's a very
multiple
important
formats.
that's going to be my transition into Carpenter.
Yes.
Carpenter's career. Obviously, this is his 3rd film. This is 1978.
Yeah.
Ghost of Mars, his penultimate film, is 2001. Right?
Sure.
This is two with no quotation marks. This is the era of VHS. The first VHSs are made and marketed from Hollywood movies in 1978 from Fox and Paramount. 2001, I think, is the first year that DVD sales overtake VHS.
It's pretty
sales.
right. That's when your
Carpenter's
your
career-
mainstream people are everyone's starting to buy a DVD.
Carpenter's career lines up in a Venn diagram. It's just inside the circle
That's fascinating.
of the
Right.
VHS era.
Right.
And he's
He's the guy whose legacy is really formalized by VHS.
Yes.
I would
Every
argue.
one
Yeah.
of his films, whether you have a Halloween clamshell, like if you're a horror fan, having the Carpenter collection on your shelf, these are just beautiful tapes of great films that the aesthetics, while obviously made for theatrical distribution, are intrinsically linked to home video.
You made a point of rewatching this on VHS
I've
for
had
this episode.
the
And then,
Halloween VHS I've had for over 20 years.
and then today you took or posted a photo of your baby daughter holding the VHS.
she grabbed it off the table when I was feeding the cats. And I came back and she just had my Halloween tape in her hands, her grabby little hands. But
Was that the moment you truly became a father for the first time, that you felt the pride?
it could have been. It'd be too bad if I waited 8 months for that. But no, I was very proud. She was close enough to the coffee table in a chair. She was restrained, and came back from feeding the cats, and she had my Halloween tape in her hands. It was very exciting. But like, this is what you're saying. Carpenter became emblematic of owning your filmmaker, because he came out right when you could do that.
Sure.
And then made movies that are lean, mean, 90-minute films that you want to rewatch all the time. And you would like to own them because they have beautiful artwork, beautiful posters, beautiful iconography. And you want to have these films in your collection, but not in the way you want to have the Star Wars trilogy. It's much more of a personal thing. It's not like everybody owns Superman on VHS.
Yeah.
Everybody owns MASH on VHS. It's like, oh, not everybody owns The Thing on VHS.
Dave and I are obsessed with physical media.
We are, but
so-
I abandoned VHS.
well,
I
that's the
can't
problem. I've
deny
been
it.
trying to get you back to it for years.
I can't have. There's no space for these fucking things. Go on, Griff. Go on.
Well, do what I
For
do.
years,
Live in an
I've been
apartment
telling
that
you
is
to-
just stacks of things on the floor that I don't know how to organize.
I've been telling David for years he needs to get a VCR. I told him I would get him
I
one
have
as
a
a
VCR.
wedding present. I told him I'd get him one as a baby shower present.
Yeah.
He won't let me buy him a VCR.
I do think I've started circling back around. Not that I need a fucking excuse for another collection, but there's certainly VHSs I held onto for a very long time, right? Certain key movies, but then also things that for a long time weren't released on DVD. And even when they finally came out, I stopped like pawning off my old VHSs and started circling back to certain things because there are movies that. They're movies where you have a nostalgic association to them in that format because that's how you saw it. And even though it's not the proper presentation of that movie, it hits some spot,
That's
right?
why I'm watching a widescreen movie like Halloween on VHS for the 10th time.
But then there are genres that sometimes are actually weirdly, if not benefited from that format, gain some sort of adjacent parallel power in that format. That it almost works as like a different cut of the film. It's smoothing over edges. It's abstracting things in a way that certainly helps with horror movies being produced on a budget, but also things where you're dealing with like patches of darkness, you know?
And there are plenty of those in this movie.
Yeah.
It's a dark movie.
It's a dark movie.
Their joke is that they couldn't afford lights, but
they also couldn't afford extras, which is one of these many things that makes many of the scenes in this movie just staggeringly weird.
Yeah.
Right.
And very, very off-putting in an entirely unnatural way in a purely mundane environment.
Absolutely.
There are... I counted this when I wrote this down because when David and I went for a dad walk recently, I was like, I have all this stuff I want to talk about.
Thank you.
Context, background, and you were like, well, that's fine because what is there to say about Halloween? Do we like the movie itself? And I was like, no, we're talking about.
No, you're characterized. I did not say that. This is also like one of my favorite movies ever, and I haven't even talked about my experience with Halloween.
I want to hear it, and about Carpenter. But I want to say one thing first. There are
go ahead.
5 sequences in this movie.
Okay.
4 of which are short, and then 1 of which is 45 minutes long.
Right.
That's the construction.
The back half is
yes.
right,
That's the construction. This movie is prologue. Loomis at the hospital.
Right.
A bit of context in Haddonfield at school. Loomis coming into Haddonfield, and the girls going after school. Then it's nighttime, 40 minutes in, and then that's the rest of the movie is a straight line.
Connected
So
together,
there are
basically.
5 sequences.
Okay. I will say this. I was terrified of this movie before I saw it. This was the scariest thing in the world to me. I knew what it was about. I knew it was about a guy called Michael Myers who went around and stabbed people. When I learned this when I was like 10 or whatever, I had never heard anything so scary in my entire life.
Yeah, because I was such a big scaredy cat, and I was such a big video store kid, and I would look at these VHX boxes that would like terrify me, and the concepts would terrify me. If I come on TV, they'd terrify me. I don't remember ever being scared of Michael Myers in that way.
But you lived downtown.
You did
That's
live
true.
downtown.
I lived in a house in a cul-de-sac.
I didn't live in the
and
side.
I was similarly terrified.
But I just remember being like, Jason is scary, Freddy's scary,
Well, Jason
Chucky's
takes
scary.
Manhattan, where you
right.
live.
Right. That's that was the scariest.
He did take it.
Yeah.
Well, but Jason and Freddy are more superficially scary looking, I suppose.
But looking at things like Basket Case and Creepshow and whatever, I'm just like, these are like grotesque. They're horrifying.
Right, but those
this
I
thing
would
came
get,
to life. Whatever.
I would get that they were scary.
Yeah.
Basket Case, so good. But then
Basket Case right around the corner from where you grew up.
Yeah.
Such a good
Right
one.
on 6th Avenue is where
Too
part
scary.
of the movie takes place.
Too scary.
But I'm not scared of Freddy in the same way because I don't think anyone's invading my dreams. I'm not going to any.
Oh, that's my ultimate
I
fear
know.
because I love sleeping, and if someone fucking dares mess with that, they're on my shit list.
I'm not scared of Jason. I'm not going to summer camp anytime
you go
soon
to the
when I'm
lake.
10 years. I do go
the
to
lake where you refused
But
to
no,
throw
but-
Ben's jeans off the dock.
That's true.
Okay, for one, that's the
You're not
ocean.
scared of
For
Chucky?
2, I wasn't. Anyway, but no,
I'm
just,
scared of Chucky because if toys could murder people, I'm fucking
I
dead in a
had-
second.
I had genuine problems.
Yeah.
Like not genuine, but like I would get scared because once I learned of the concept of there's like a serial killer. What's that? It's like a person who goes
Okay.
around killing people for
So Michael
no
Myers
real
is
reason.
just tapping into that for you.
It's probably the first time I'm hearing about it in a significant way.
Okay.
When was this? What
I
year?
think I'm like 9 or 10 years old, something like that.
But so was this before or after you would have seen Scream, which is a first horror movie for a lot of people?
I had not seen Scream. I think I was aware of Scream. This is before Scream, and then I became aware of Scream. But I thought Scream was like a comedy, and Scream was such an MTV movie.
Oh, it's very meta and it's very.
But I didn't
clever,
see.
right.
Probably didn't see.
I'm just
Scream
saying,
until a couple
you
years
guys
later.
talked about this once when Scream
Yeah.
came up. It's like there hadn't been a horror movie released in theaters like that for
It's true.
7
It was-
years.
right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, that was the first time they sat in a theater and watched a slasher movie.
But this is interesting. Like there's a crystallization of your understanding of serial killers
It
existing
could just
as a
be
thing.
a guy,
Right.
Like,
And also
with a
that,
name,
that you could make a movie with that structure.
right?
Both are tied to Michael Myers. Like he
Very
becomes the face of
creepy.
that entire concept for you across reality and art.
And then I see the movie, I don't know, as a teenager. I don't know when I saw it for the first time, but it was on television. But by that point, I'm a cinephile, a budding cinephile.
Well.
Sitting
And
there
so I
with
am
your
also-
beret
Yeah,
and your
right.
and your
Wow.
cigarette holder.
While he's on the boards.
I'm already appreciate. And then there's
Yes.
I don't know if I should tell this story.
Say it.
do it.
There's a moment sometime in my teenagehood where I'm extolling Halloween to somebody, a couple friends, English people.
While you were on vacation. Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Weird
no, I lived
use
in
of a holiday. Just show up in a foreign city, yell
I'm
at some local
describing the
kids
scene.
about a movie you like.
I'm describing, I think, the scene where Loomis and the sheriff are like in the Myers home, and they're poking around, and then like the window, something falls through the window.
Gutter or something. A broken gutter.
It's I think it is a gutter.
Yeah.
And it's a good jump, and it's obviously there's nothing to it, right? Great moment. And I think I described the scene loudly. I think I just described it as a pipe coming through the window. And for years, my friends would repeat me saying like, crash, a pipe goes through the window, which I don't think I ever said. I think they puffed it
It
up in
became
their
a
heads.
play it again, Sam.
Exactly.
You
And
like me, you really
if-
like me.
If the two people who know what I'm talking about are listening, they know what they know.
They would
know
tease you
about
by
this.
screaming crash a
Yeah,
pipe.
all
into
the time.
window.
If I ever got excited about anything ever again in any
Right.
context where I would become more animated, which
Crash
This is
a
very
pipe.
sometimes I
useful
do.
because I feel like you get animated a lot.
That's why I was afraid to say it on
Yep.
mic.
Oh well, it's part of the glossary now. It's in the lexicon. baby.
Exactly. And so I don't know why I'm bringing this back into my life, but
And I want Ben to offer some of his. Ben's holding a Carpenter book.
Yeah.
But I want to just quickly say I cannot remember for the life of me exactly when this was, but there was 2 consecutive weekends when I was like 12 where I saw, it must have been the Sci-Fi Channel. One Friday showed all the Halloween movies, and I was at like, maybe I was 11, and at like 7 or 8 o'clock, I was like, oh, I'll watch this. And the next thing I know, it's 7 a.m. and I can't sleep. And I'm terrified. And the next week, they did Friday the 13th. And I just remember these marathons. And then, but Halloween, similarly, I was like, well, I'm not at a lake. And I don't have any reason for Jason to come after
you
me.
mean Friday the 13th. Yes. Yeah.
However, I do have this fear that some guy might just walk into this house and stab me with a
scary.
knife because really the street looks not unlike my own.
Right. I didn't live in the suburbs, but I still, I did, I lived on a quiet street in London.
In New York City. Oh.
But I swear to God.
David, put down that knife.
I do think that's the brilliance of this movie is right. It's like the and I've said this, I think I've said this on this podcast before, but right, like the suburbs feel so safe. Obviously, that's how they're designed.
Well, see, it's funny. I think of the suburbs as being very terrifying, but I wonder if it's only because of horror movies.
Because they're quiet as well. But
Right.
the suburbs are supposed to feel safe,
Yes,
right? They're
sure.
supposed to be the place,
Sure.
Where you're like, well, of course my kids can run around here. But then it's of course of like, well, if a guy with a knife wanted to kill you, all he has to do is like open one door.
Right.
No one
Right.
locks their door.
No,
Wanted
this is
to-
why I find them scary. Whereas, like, I look at slasher movies like as a kid, and I'm like, well, I live on the 11th floor. I'm
Right,
golden.
This guy's not
like,
getting to me.
Right.
But one of the most brilliant moments in this movie is when she's hammering on the guy on the door and the light comes on and then nothing else happens and then she has to go to the next house. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so good and it's so unspoken.
That
One's fucking helping you out there.
no, I am
that
realizing this
fear
is
really
why
gripped me watching this movie for
Yeah.
the first time and many other times. Like that's what's so magical about it. And then like you look out your window and you're just like, as they look out the window in this movie 15 times.
Sure.
And it's just like there's nobody out there.
I
There's
am
nobody.
realizing this is why I think I'm so much more scared by supernatural shit.
Another
Yeah.
scary thing that's in this movie is just getting stuck into like boring conversations with people that live in the town with you. God, that is another part of the suburbs that is the worst.
Keystone to many a horror film, of course, is right. That early scene where it's like
Bad talk.
dialogue. Right.
Yeah. Ugh.
Creek. Just kidding. It's not an ad read. Sorry. It's me, Alex, cutting in to my own contextful episode with one crucial thing that I forgot. I had it written down. I can't believe that I forgot to talk about this. I lost sleep later that night because I knew that the explanation of this movie and this time period was not complete without something incredibly crucial. Okay, going to be very fast. As I've been saying, 1968 to 1978 is the period I am discussing here as a way of understanding how and why John Carpenter's Halloween landed with the impact that it did when it came out in 1978. The biggest thing I forgot to mention is that 1968 to 1969, Zodiac Killer starts murdering. 1969, Charles Manson. 1972 to 1978, John Wayne Gacy. 1973, the beginning of the Golden State Killer. 76 and 77, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. And starting in 1978, Jeffrey Dahmer. These 10 years that I'm trying to explain as being the period of American history into which Halloween is born cannot be properly understood in terms of people's hunger or appetite for slasher films, horror, whatever you want to call it, without first understanding the overwhelming rise in crime, serial killers, serial murders, random killings, and other associated fear that crept into the country at this time. This is where slashers come from. This is why movies like Halloween are separate from all the other horror movies I have been talking about that came out prior to 1978. Okay, back to the episode. Ben, what do you have in that book there? Do you have some Carpenter Halloween stuff?
I just have it as we're going to go through. I'll throw out some facts.
We can talk about all five.
I think we
of
should
these
talk
sequences.
about maybe Deborah Hill's involvement.
Yes.
She's come up a little bit here
Very
and there.
interesting and very important, I think, too. She goes hand in hand with Dean Cundey, I think, for this film.
Big influence.
Looking
on
up both of their filmographies is undeniable that she brings Cundey to Carpenter. Because she works with him before... She works with Dean Cundey on earlier films that she's involved with.
Yes.
So his career is in progress. Her career is in progress. And then she kind of brings him over.
He worked
on, that was 1977, Satan's Cheerleaders, which is a good movie. And also 1977, Charge of the Model Ts, which stars Troy McClure, of course. And Dean Cundey shot both of those movies. He didn't shoot Assault on Precinct 13. And then suddenly he's Carpenter's guy. Clearly when you have to assume like, this guy's magic. Right. Like there's something he's doing here that we need to bring over. And she also clearly is like in the scripting, the Laurie Strode is obviously, as has been historically noted, a character she was very connected to and gave her hometown the name of Laurie Strode's hometown. Mm-hmm. She's obviously very instrumental in shaping both the story and the craft of this movie.
Some things from our dossier. I'm just looking at this to spice in, right? You know, like they also just came up with scares. Before they even had, obviously
they were like,
know
should be a
they're
scare
making
every 10 minutes. We want this to be structured like a radio serial.
But like Deborah Hill has the idea of like, what if your boyfriend went downstairs, came up with the sheet over him, but then it's not your boyfriend anymore, and they're like, great, that's got to be in the movie, right? Like things like that. Like they're coming up with the ideas first, and they're like, don't worry, we'll build a plot around.
That is
this.
Michael's one bit.
It's a good bit.
It's funny.
Great.
I
Well,
find
the
it
glasses
very
is what
funny.
makes it a real.
Well,
movie.
the glasses, and then he cuts the eye holes in the sheet,
Yeah.
which you don't see him doing.
Yeah, but he loves eye holes. We know from the first shot. This guy is fucking obsessed with eye holes. But he's got a mask.
But you don't see him do it. I would like to see him.
You'd
cut
like to
those
see him
eye-
just delicately like.
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy.
No.
And they're very symmetrical, and they're the same size.
They always do line up because like sometimes it's like
did a good
uneven
job,
or
yeah.
they're too far apart.
Or
Too
one is
close.
big and one is small.
The way Hill puts it is she wrote the first draft and it was mostly the teenagers, and Carpenter comes in and layers in the Loomis stuff,
Right.
which makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Because Carpenter's the one with the truly deathly outlook on things. Like and they say this about Escape from New York, right? Where he's like, again, like he writes this really bleak script and Nick Castle comes in and is like, it should be funnier.
Yeah,
This is the best thing
Right.
about him. Rewatching now, as I've done, like,
And he's fine to collaborate on
like
obviously,
a
you know,
dozen
right.
of his movies leading up to this, and just wanting to be refreshed for the series is like. He just has the most horrible outlook on humanity.
There should be a character walking around being like, pure evil suffuses this man.
And it's like, is that character depicted as crazy? It's like, actually, at the end, we prove him right.
Right. He's always correct.
He's spot on. And then it's in those other movies, it's like, so what happens at the end? It's like, oh, all hell breaks loose. And then the credits roll. Right. I just love his nihilism.
It is-
It's totally refreshing and so not. It's just not comforting, and yet these movies are comfort movies for people who love horror.
I know we're still in the early days, but I know of much of what's to come. It is just kind of incredible how committed he is to these abrupt endings where it's just like
End of story, end of movie. Because
Right.
he's like a
just
40s
gets
and
out.
50s guy.
Right.
Like,
He's the Howard Hawks thing.
Right.
It's like, what more is there to do? We don't need a button here.
Right,
yeah, like the story's over, and I guess what's next with credits? Like, do
Right.
we want to have the characters wrap it up? No. Like,
right,
that's-
there's like nothing cute that ever happens at the end of a Carpenter movie. It's always some note of like lingering bleakness or anger or like a final spit in the face.
Yeah.
Or a kind of shrug of like, I don't know, we're all fucked.
Yeah,
whatever.
that's the thing. They live a little
don't know.
bit. Like
Right,
you see
right.
it in a lot of his movies. It's just so great.
Yeah.
Movies that don't have sequels.
Right.
That it's just he's just so miserable in his outlook
But even like, not to jump ahead, but the fact that he did not intend for this movie to have a sequel ever, and that the ending is the body disappearing and the guy being like, well, yeah, I mean, of course.
can't kill the
fucking-
boogeyman.
can't
Well, yeah,
kill
like,
evil,
hey kids,
whatever.
the boogeyman is still out there. Maybe
Right.
he's coming to you. Maybe he's coming for you next.
Yeah.
Also, because this movie has no justification for what Michael Myers is doing.
It's huge.
This does not have the sibling
Rob
pursuit. This is one of those
Zombie,
things I was
right.
saying, like Friday the 13th. People put that in their memory
Yes.
of this movie,
Right.
But it is not in this movie that him and Laurie Strode are related,
Right.
But it's something that you put there, and at the end of the movie, it's like, no, there's just a boogeyman out there.
There's a quote from Carpenter here that I really love about what we're talking about that I want to read, which is that when they were shooting the final shot, which I love, and the shot of Pleasance's face.
Yes.
Pleasance was like, I can give you, I knew this was going to happen, and I can give you, I can't believe this happened.
Right.
And Carpenter was like, well, I definitely knew that it was probably going to be, I knew this was going to happen, but he
Yeah.
gave me both. And he left the decision in my hands, which is the mark of a great actor. That's Carpenter's opinion, where he's like, Pleasance is just like a guy who's like, I'll do I'm an actor.
Sure.
I can give you any face you need. You'll figure it out later, right?
Yeah.
Like he's not like, no, Loomis would definitely only do this.
Yeah.
Like he's a Swiss Army
That's a
knife.
good Pleasance.
Yeah. It is
Yeah,
good.
I love Donald Pleasance. Donald Pleasance is the fucking best.
Now I feel
he's-
bad. My impression at the beginning.
He's
of the
one
episode
of
was garbage.
the most prominent people for me that it's like for 15 years I was like, it's the guy from Halloween.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, he was a massively famous and successful
Blofeld,
actor
right, you know,
before.
right.
But yeah, for me, just forever and ever.
Well,
it's
he's
like,
he's also in so many Halloweens
Right.
as
Yes.
well.
He
And I
lets
did
this
just watch
become-
them all. And he's in what, conservatively 6 of them?
well, he's not in 3.
He's not in
right?
3, so I guess he's in 5.
He's in 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
And then you've got McDowell, given his spin in the
yeah,
zombies.
but he's
right.
not in. He's up through 6. He's
He's
not
up
in
through 6.
H2O.
6 is the one where he's really on his last legs.
But
Yeah.
there's something. I mean, I think you said this. I don't remember if you said it on mic or you said before we were recording. But that like his first choice was Peter Cushing and his second choice was Christopher Lee.
Both obvious.
he wanted a
horror
Hammer
legends,
guy.
right? Yep.
But aside from the baggage, the associations of them, they're also guys who look like they belong in horror movies, right? Like
And
Christopher
certainly by
Lee-
78, they've been in horror movies
Absolutely.
for 25
But
years.
you're
But
also
also
just
just-
the face.
Right, the bone structure on both of those guys, the
Cushing
voices
looks
on
like
both
a
of them.
skeleton man,
Right.
Who's like wearing a little bit of skin just to convince you he's not a skeleton, man.
Right.
And Christopher Lee, yeah, I mean,
He's got this
you know,
long, elegant
yeah, he looks
face and
like a
these very sort of
tree.
intense eyes and whatever. Like you put them in a horror movie, they feel like they belong. There's something about Pleasance who feels like, despite the fact that this character becomes so big for him and he does other horror movies and other Carpenter movies and whatever, that he doesn't totally feel like he belongs in this world without also feeling like, oh shit, this is weird that Alec Guinness is in Star Wars, you
Right.
know? Where it's a clear, like, I am gifting you the prestige. It's instead just like, this is like a real guy. This is just like an adult man who is now caught up in this horrible thing.
Well, also because if Peter Cushing had been in it when I saw it, I would have been like, that guy's in Star
That's
Wars.
Tarkin.
Whereas when I
It's
saw
a
this,
year after Star
when I
Wars.
saw
Right.
this, all I thought was, that's Dr. Loomis.
Right.
And the development of this is so, that's a whole other thing you could talk about.
Well,
but like
Pleasance
because-
decides to be in the movie because his daughter liked the score for Escape from New York, which is
or
wild.
from Assault on Precinct 13.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Assault on Precinct 13. Not right now. Escape from New York.
The budget for
his
this movie,
time traveling daughter.
the budget for this movie was $300,000. He got paid $25,000.
Pretty good.
It's like, right. And 50% of the budget is the cameras and the lenses.
Right.
In a lot of my reading, I feel like in this like independent phase of his career, it's just been really wild to just like kind of get like more a glimpse into just like how random weird rich people would just pay for these things.
Sure.
And it's just
Fuck
like
some weird guy
and like
this
and
guy
he read the
writing a
script
check.
and, like what does he know? But he's like,
Right.
all right, I don't know. Here's $300,000.
Well, also, he was the anecdote I read somewhere was that he was pitching the movie to Akkad, and Akkad was filming.
Mustafa Akkad, one of the all-time names.
We'll get
Great-
back.
a great
We'll get
name.
back to him.
Yeah,
the
Akkad-
message.
Akkad, right, was doing this big epic.
Yeah.
And Carpenter was like, I think I could do this for $300,000. And Akkad like took a moment and went, the movie I'm making right now costs $300,000 a day, and it is driving me crazy. If this guy thinks he can actually get the whole thing done in that amount of time, I'm willing to take a flyer on that. It's like, fine.
Can
Who gives a
teenagers
shit?
die in it? Yeah, okay, then you can have.
Right, fine.
And Carpenter's not even like, I have to make this movie. He's
No.
just like, I really want to keep making movies.
Right.
This is the level someone's going to let me work at right now.
Carpenter's
right.
like also pitching to him as a business proposition where he's sort of, I don't think giving the full Alex Ross Perry manifesto, but sort of saying like, here's what's been going, here's what's been working. I could work off of this. This is why I don't need many locations, why I don't need many actors, like all this sort of stuff. And he goes like, fine, yeah, why not? Who knows? Who cares? Like, and I think by his own admission was just sort of like, this is a flyer, who gives a shit? And then once this movie hit big, he was like, I am keeping my fingers around this franchise forever.
Glad I didn't,
always-
let, let this guy own any of this stuff. I
Right.
just gave him no money to create.
Right. And like Akkad's son is still like, I know there's still weird shit with like, it's a lot easier to make merchandise of the Halloween sequels than of the original film.
But via COD, COD dies in a terrorist attack. But his son is now in charge of the movies,
Yes.
and he was the one who greenlit the zombies.
Right.
And then now the Gordon Greens.
Right. Because the sequels had studio participation, I think he has less complete control. Whereas anything that's rooted in the first movie, it's like cannot happen without Akkad's son giving the thumbs up.
But also, these people love money.
Yes.
They've
Well,
been,
that's the other thing.
they've been
He asked
minting
for,
money
like,
off of this for
people
40
who make
years.
movies. Yeah.
Right, because they're all fucking like NECA Toys, which is the action figure company that makes a lot of horror movie stuff, has been producing like a ton of like Halloween 3, Halloween 2, and everyone's like, why can't you make Halloween 1? And they're like, Halloween 1 costs like 8 times as much as Halloween 2.
I had the McFarlane Toys Michael Myers.
Merchandise Spotlight, I'll get back to that later.
I had that. But everything from David, you know I love when you narrate a poster. Could you narrate the Halloween poster for me, please?
Wait, and not the Halloween poster for Tyler Perry's.
We'll do that later.
Yeah, we'll do that.
We'll do that
for
after we do the box office game for that as well.
Patreon series. Why would you give that up for
Just narrate
free?
this poster for me.
Yeah.
I almost did a bit though, where I was like, "We're not here to talk Halloween." The
Once
Halloween
again, save that for Patreon.
Halloween poster, very simple. A great poster.
And is there a tagline on this poster?
Narrate it, David.
Top of the poster, Halloween.
Already, I'm interested.
It's a great holiday we all love.
And of course, part of the pitch, of course, for this movie also was like, wait, no one's ever called a movie Halloween?
I was gonna
Like,
say,
yeah. Sort of like
I-
going through the archive.
I
Yeah.
know I've called out several horror films in this episode already as having some of the best titles of all time. Halloween might have the smartest title of all time.
That and Psycho. I mean, it's hard to.
Halloween's just so fucking good, though. It's just like,
And it's in the font. The
Right.
font that like you can still market a movie on.
yes.
Yeah. Well,
The image here below the title, and I also have the title's big H, big N. You know, I like this sort of, that's fun.
great.
A man's hand is dragged.
What color is the font?
It's white and orange.
Like a jack-o'-lantern.
Sure. Man's hand dragging the knife across, right? You got this sort of 5 knife kind of like image there, right? But of course, that also looks like a pumpkin. And then the pumpkin's got scary eyes.
They do.
Like a jack-o'-lantern.
Right. And then the tagline, the night he,
Now,
in italics,
wait a minute.
Wait a second.
came home.
And now wait a minute. I have 10 questions.
There's no further answers.
Who? Why is this in italics? Where was he? And how long has he been gone? And why was he away?
And what is his home?
Right away, you're just like the mind reels.
Yeah.
With how important this sounds.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable
It's
how
not-
crucial these posters are to these 70s horror
course.
movies.
It's
too.
not
Like it's just
the
the
night-
tagline is so crucial.
It's not the night death came to Haddonfield.
sure. Or it's like
not,
watch out if you're a babysitter.
It's
which,
not
you know,
the.
is a pretty
It's
good
not the night the killings happened.
Right.
He in italics. Who are we talking
But to
about?
this
Already,
point-
this guy is
The guy with the knife. I mean,
already.
Right?
This is already. I cannot even
Yes.
begin to conceal my excitement for what this story might be.
To the point of like Myers becoming the first real modern horror icon. It's like this movie's telling you like this guy is important.
He's the boogeyman.
Right.
You know the boogeyman. It turns out he has a first and last name.
Right. He's actually has like a social security number and shit. It's funny. Friday the 13th, I would say, bad tagline. They were warned, they are doomed, and on Friday the 13th, nothing will save them. But that was saved by the fact that it was called Friday the 13th. That was enough,
Another
I guess.
great title.
To carry it. Nightmare on Elm Street doesn't.
Is it not just 1-2? Freddy's coming. for
Yeah,
you?
isn't something like that?
If Nancy doesn't wake up screaming, she won't wake up at all,
Okay.
which is a great tagline.
Actually, that's a great title.
tagline. No,
Well,
just
Texas Chainsaw Massacre has the superior one to all of these.
who will survive and what will be left
Yes.
of them. Yeah, great. Well, that's the thing. Like, the Last House on the Left has, to avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie, it's
Right.
only a movie, which is like one of those taglines where you're like, what? What is this about?
Okay, but to your point, Alex, none of these other taglines invite the same questions as Halloween.
I have so many questions.
Right.
And let's start talking about those questions as it pertains to the stunning prologue of this movie.
David.
Yeah.
I have heard of Michael Myers.
You've heard of Michael Myers, the villain of Halloween.
But Mackle Weldon?
Wow. Oh boy. Are we sure about that?
Mackle Weldon?
So, Griff,
Mhm.
you're clearly a busy guy because you didn't have enough time to think up a way to transition from Halloween to Mac Weldon.
No characters in the ad reads these episodes. Clearly, I'm a busy guy.
And so you must be too busy thinking about what to wear. That's my
Correct.
guess. You need to just embrace the radically efficient Mac Weldon daily wear system, okay?
Yep.
That's what you need to do. You got to embrace it because then you will be less busy and you'll have more time to think of puns that are appropriate and funny for our ad reads. It's going to work out. It's going to free up so much time.
Here's a true story.
Okay. I love a true story. Based on a true story.
I had to do a massive, massive load of laundry recently. I'd gone too long without doing laundry.
Okay.
It was so big I had to split it over 2 days, right?
Okay.
Take it into the laundromat, whatever, right? And now I have all my Mack Weldons cleaned and back in circulation for the first time in a while. My Mack Weldon silver underwear, right?
Absolutely.
And I looked at them last night and I was just like, why don't I have more pairs of this? Because I realized psychologically, I have less pairs than there are days of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go into the hamper and then they're out of circulation till I get off my butt and wash them again. And then I'm disappointed every day that I'm wearing a different pair of underwear. And so I bit the bullet last night. Just last night. I didn't even know they were a sponsor on this episode. Just last night, I ordered like twice as much Mack Weldon underwear.
Look,
because
just treat
it's a
yourself.
better day. It's a better day when I'm wearing Mack Weldon.
Look, I agree with you, and everyone's they got their favorite pairs, and then when you're out of it starts to get a little depressing, and you miss your favorite pairs. So the daily wear system is a selection of clothes rooted in smart design, made with performance fabrics, built to work together. Okay, there's breathable t-shirts and polos, there's stylish button-ups and shorts, underwear, and beyond. Mack Weldon makes it easy for you to dress for work, dress for leisure, dress for play, wherever your summer takes you. Okay, you just talked about the underwear. I'm a big fan of their polo shirts, kind of a classic like work casual thing for me. I've got a lot of those. And I was kind of like you, where I was like, you know what? Why don't I just get like 10 of these? Why don't I just like always have one available, basically?
Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. For the ultimate lazy Sunday, they've got these Ace sweat shorts with modern tailoring. Those pair really well with their ultra soft Pima tees. They've got the silver knit polo, and you can combo that with the radius shorts. It's sort of like wine and food. They're just trying to tell you, like, look, put all these things together. You're going to have an outfit you like.
And I'll give you a personal experience here. I found that the lazy Sunday shorts work just as well on a lazy Monday through Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. And look, okay, you can buy some time this summer. And there's still time in summer left, so buy some, okay? You can buy some time this summer with the Mack Weldon Daily Wear System for 20% off your first order. Visit MackWeldon.com/check and enter promo code CHECK. That's MackWeldon.com/check, promo code CHECK for 20% off. Mack Weldon, it's radically efficient wardrobing.
Take good care of yourself. Get some Mack Weldon.
Yes, and wear a mask.
I can't even say how many times watching this movie I thought, I have seen this ripped off 50 times. It's never been done better.
I think this movie is great. I think the entire movie is great. My only complaint about it is like the prologue is like the best thing I've ever seen.
It is.
The movie for me is never kind of as good as the prologue, even though the rest of the movie is arguably the best of its kind for me.
It's another one of those things, like Laurie being his sister, that you're like, this one thing looms so large in my mind. You watch the prologue and you're like, here we go. This is one of the greatest films ever made. And then nothing is as stylish as that.
No, I mean, Carpenter basically says, like, cops to the fact, like, I'm this formalist. I like hawks. Like, it's so unlike that because it's this insanely showy sequence.
Right.
But
it's him doing fucking Touch of Evil when like Orson Welles was the exact kind of guy he didn't like, who was sort of like putting too much mustard on every
It is
shot.
like at that point, it's like what David sort of said with like Crocodile Dundee too. At that point, you're like, well, this is 10 stars.
Right.
This can only go down to 4 from here.
Right.
The beginning of this movie is so good.
Right. Yes, it's unbelievable. And as you said, there's just like, there's no explanation.
Keeping in mind, we've jumped past something extremely important, which is the opening credits, which is already 10 stars.
So good.
Just
a million stars.
Just that the
music,
the
but
music
also
and the
the
zoom on the
fonts.
pumpkin and the fonts. Already, it's just like I'm in this mood that is so unusual for everything else I've just listed of what you would have seen in this genre for the previous 10 years.
It's just one of those things where it's like, I know if I were a time traveler, I should probably go stop 9/11 or whatever, but it's like, wouldn't it be cool?
David, you were alive then. You could have done that.
You could have done
I could have done it.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to happen.
Mark Wahlberg would have done it. And you're saying you wouldn't even have tried?
But like, imagine sitting with an audience and those titles come up and they are unprepared for the movie, and but just like the weird atmosphere that must have been generated.
Also, just that the score is so fucking aggressive, right? Where even you compare it to like Draws, which is
Jaws. Wait, is that a Southern movie about killer underwear?
Jaws.
Draws.
I think that's going on the slate as well.
You compare it to Jaws.
Dude, you just sold another great horror film.
Right. But Jaws,
it's so much more
which of course has
methodical.
wonderful music, and has a wonderful
This
opening
is so much
sequence.
like Jaws. He uses music so much like,
but
in the way that it's
weird,
like the killer has a
time
theme.
signature.
The killer, every time the killer appears, you hear the killer's little song.
Well, it's, I mean, the fucking genius of this movie. There's the story that like he screened this to someone, some distributor, and they were like, no, thank you.
Not scary. They said like you have to. Well, I'll find
nothing scary about this movie.
It's a young film exec said he hadn't made her scared at all, and you need to save this film with music. Now Carpenter says that person did later come to me and say like I was totally off, by the way. Like did apologize,
but also
he appreciated the note,
but also that she was like, it's an amazing case study in how important music. The correct score is to the emotionality of a film, whatever emotion you're going for.
Yes, I mean it's why the Gordon Green movie, I would say, almost is successful just because it uses the score. I mean, I know he's like doing some new stuff, but like because that's still the
keeps it
scariest
fairly
thing.
simple.
Right. And the thing I don't like about the Gordon Green movie is when it goes a little too much. Where I'm like, the whole point is Carpenter never goes overboard.
I think that movie gets a little overly complicated. Right. Carpenter is a master of like understatement and economy and just keeping things as like primal and elemental as possible.
But at the same time, this opening sequence is so lurid and like it must have been so gross,
and it's so showy. The lack of, like, 1963 Halloween, the first thing you see on screen, and you're like, so far so good.
Sure.
It's a long time ago, and then it's all POV. It is or seems like one shot.
It is one shot,
but there's a couple.
No, there's 3 cuts.
There's a couple
with the masks being taken on and off.
But it is an unbroken illusion of time.
It's 3 shots, 2 cuts. I think for when the mask goes on and off.
There's this. It was the last thing they filmed, which is great, and I think partly because they were just like, we don't know.
We got to work.
We got to work on this before we know.
Right.
And there's moments where electricians would run from one room to the other with a light.
Cool.
Because they didn't have enough.
Yeah. With the light that they...
Right. Exactly. And like Jamie Lee Curtis talks, who's not a part of the... Like watched the whole thing happen and said like it was super exciting to watch. It's not Steadicam. It's something called Panaglide, which was like a Steadicam knockoff, which is why it is less distressingly motionless than like the Shining or whatever. It does have a little wobble
that it looks
to it.
handheld-ish.
Right.
Because there's so much steady later.
It was less good at like a horizon, having a steady horizon. Like the Steadicam is the king, but it's like a knockoff Steadicam.
But it's like it's just unbelievable. And like when he reaches for the knife and it kind of loses focus on the hand concealing the surprise that is coming. It's like you could see that's the hand of a 7-year-old or whatever he's supposed to be.
But even just the
But
first
the
moment.
reveal of his face. But I mean,
Well, but also I was gonna say the first moment when you realize, oh, you were watching the POV of someone, right? It goes from being like, and it's easy to say this from a modern perspective, but it's like this is the kind of camera work we associate with a horror movie at this point, right? This
totally
sort of
new,
voyeuristic,
right.
weird distance, slow creep, slightly shaky, unnatural, holding on the shots for too long kind of energy. And the moment they like address him, and you realize like, oh, this is now going to be a language for the rest of the movie that I no longer know when I am watching an impartial view of something that's about to happen or I'm seeing through his eyes. And that always remains scary for the entire running time.
That first shot I love of them kissing through the door.
Yeah.
But just like sums up everything this movie's going to be about, even the future, like even the present day stuff. Love that.
There's nothing 60s about what these people look like.
No,
which is the
nothing
other great
really.
thing.
That's true.
No.
They
They
basically
look
that's
hyper
true.
Yeah.
contemporary to late 70s, but it is just like it's so sexual, it's like titillating and it's violent,
Right.
and it's ultimately like kind of weird and depressing to
But
be.
that's like the Pop Rocks and Soda thing where it's like people are like, you can't do that. Right?
Right.
Can you have like a woman's boobs like covered in blood? Like this is so shocking.
and then it's like, and the boobs were being seen by like a
little
boy.
boy.
Right.
Right.
Who is then stabbing the boobs.
He is. He's murdering his sister.
Is
Yeah.
no good, very bad though.
You don't do it. You're gonna get thrown in fucking head.
And the messaging too is really disturbing in like a lot of different ways of just like you're trying to figure out why would he do this?
Right.
Why is he watching her?
Right. Why-
Like
right.
like what are they trying to say about her?
The way
and
she
like
says
her
Michael,
relationship
like,
to
ugh.
sex. Yeah,
Right,
like
yeah.
exactly.
But
Michael.
they're not like
they're
assholes
so
to
weird.
the kid. There's no moment.
Yeah, and you
like-
know what's great is that none of those things Ben just said are ever addressed.
Right, but
Right.
that's like, but it's Carpenter knowing that the scarier things are in your fucking mind. I mean, it's the thing I thought was so interesting that like the way he directed Nick Castle on set was Castle would be like, so what's my motivation? What do you want here? And it's like, your motivation is you start at this point, you end at this point. Don't
Yeah, just
play
walk.
anything.
Right.
The entire point is I want to make the least relatable character in the history of cinema. It is impossible to figure him out. So you're only projecting your own shit onto him because I'm not giving you anything.
Right. It's the funniest thing because Castle is like, I did the movie because I wanted to see how movies were made. Like I was more.
I
interested
lived in
that.
the neighborhood.
Well,
They
and
would
he'd
pay
worked
me
with
$10
Carpenter.
a day.
To
He's
say,
worked with Carpenter
shot
on
in
Dark Star.
Pasadena,
Right, shot
despite
in
being
Pasadena.
set in Illinois. And there's many hilarious incongruities
Right.
of what Illinois would look like versus what California looks
They
like.
painted a bunch of leaves brown and would cart them from location to location and
course.
spread them around
But then, like,
because they
when-
couldn't paint that many leaves.
But
so
like,
they
well,
had some.
obviously, like
It's a save
It's
leave.
like,
later-
all right, seat's over. Get the leaves.
later when they're like at the school, it's one of those weird California outdoor schools,
Yes,
and you're
right,
like, well, this
right.
were in Illinois for 3 months of the year, it would be 20 degrees.
It would look like a
outside.
John Hughes school if it were in Illinois. You know,
but
like a
it
big
is-
building. Right.
But it just doesn't matter. I didn't.
Right.
I never for a second until I learned. Oh, the Halloween houses in Pasadena. Ever thought?
You can go see it.
I bet this movie is not shot in.
It's one of those things where like I fall prey to this sort of movie logic too, where I just go like, oh, I guess I didn't know that's what houses look like in this town.
Yeah. Well, it's also like you mentioned, like Deborah Hill, like she's from Haddonfield, New Jersey. I don't know why they say Illinois. There seems to be no logical connection.
It's the
to
same
Illinois.
way that Nightmare on Elm Street is for some reason eventually clarified to be also in the Midwest. It's sort of like
Right.
something spooky in the Midwest is creepier,
You're
I
just
guess.
very far away from things.
right.
But
yeah,
it's great.
yeah.
The prologue is great, and then it
It's
says
good. It's
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure
and as
good.
you said, that shot, the reveal where you go around
his little face and he's a little cherub.
But like you're talking about the lack of merchandise from the first movie, and there's so many things like him with the sheet or the boy like in the clown costume. Like there's so many little morsels of iconography in only this movie.
There were like 5 years before Akkad Sr. died where they were licensing it out and all that shit got made, and now people want it again, and
And
the
it's
old
rare.
stuff's really rare, and
Right.
they can't reproduce it.
There you go.
That's the thing. But there was a zone where you could buy like Little Michael, Michael with the sheet, all that shit.
I had a 20-inch plush Michael that when you pressed his chest, the theme played.
pretty cool.
He
I
didn't
don't know what
say
happened to
things.
it.
He didn't go
He
like,
wasn't like, hey, it's me, Michael.
hey, Alex, you're my friend.
My Spidey
I
senses
came from
tingling.
the mental institution. All right.
Speaking of the mental institution, sequence number 2, Loomis at the hospital. This features, I think, one of the greatest shots in the history of the genre, which is all the inmates wandering around in the field,
So spooky.
in their white robes, in the headlights, in the pouring rain, and you see the look on his face, and they're like, "Are they usually allowed out?" And he's like, no, something is very, very wrong here. And right away, it's just like you've gone from this completely subjective, wonderful flexing of technique to this just like classic rainy night. And it says it's October 30th, so you know it's going to happen. Nothing's happening now.
Right.
And then they pull up in this rainy night at an insane asylum. And it's just like, now what's happening?
Another thing I
Is
like,
this where he came home from?
another thing I like is that like Loomis in this is kind of like Will Graham in Manhunter, where it's like this thing just permanently ruined him, right? Like he's got some of the Carpenter cynicism, but it's also just like this kid just kind of broke his brain, and he has spent the rest of his life being like partially a husk.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
you see that in he plays that so well
He
when they
plays
pull
it
up.
so well.
And-
the other movies and the remakes and the reboots
Yeah.
all try and contextualize that more, and I don't really need it.
No.
You know what I mean?
It's so much more interesting to just be like, he hasn't spoken a word in 15 years.
Right.
And you're thinking, wow, this is a long doctor-patient relationship.
But I mean, that's why it's so funny because he's a doctor,
That
he's
has
a psychiatrist. What does he do? Stalks around the suburbs in a raincoat with a gun, being like, "I gotta shoot this fucking patient."
Well, he's just like,
he-
I
but he sets
understand.
that up
Yeah,
here when they're
right.
like, why are we transferring
Right.
him? And he goes, because it's the law.
Yeah, I have to.
And
Right.
you're
Right.
already like, he wants to lock this guy
But
up.
he's not
and
like
going-
Michael can be saved. He's like,
You,
no.
It's all that stuff is true, and you're forgetting he does also do funny voices when kids approach the house, which is part of his psychiatrist training.
But also the biggest thing is that like this movie, I mean, it comes out of like 4 or 5 different places that all coalesce beautifully into making
it's
this
endless
perfect
parallel
diamond.
action.
Right.
You're saying the production or the narrative?
I'm talking production, but
Okay.
narrative as well, right? But like production, it's like there are 4 or 5 different thoughts that all come together for this movie to be this like perfect jewel. But one of the key ones is Carpenter is at a psychiatric hospital and he sees a child with like the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes, right? And he just like that sticks with him. The idea of just seeing someone where it's like there's just fucking nothing there. Like I just felt like I was looking evil in the face. How does a child that young contain that? You know, how does
wonder
that
what he was
exist
doing there.
on this planet? He was volunteering there? I was trying to get an answer on this.
Wait, who was?
Carpenter.
Oh, Carpenter was. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I was trying to get an answer on this.
But this asylum stuff is so tense,
Right.
And then they crawls over the roof of the
But
car.
that's the
and
thing is like everyone else
going
is
like,
sort of saying like not getting the severity of Loomis, and he's like, you don't understand. I looked at him.
Right. It's
When
over.
you look at this is not anything like what anyone else has dealt with before.
and he's not a crackpot. He's a psychiatrist.
Right. He's
a doctor.
calm.
Yes, it's right. It's in the sequels he gets crackpottier.
No,
I would
here
say.
he's a measure of authority.
Yes.
Who literally says, there's no soul inside that body. He's evil. He's gone. The evil is gone. We showed up too late. The transfer.
And this movie is about Michael Myers, said evil golem. He gets some coveralls. He gets a mask. He goes around
the night
stabbing
he
people.
came home.
He does come home, but of course, it's all in the sequels that he's chasing Laurie for a reason.
No reason here.
There's no reason here.
I think it's just because she drops the key off,
Yeah, there's
And-
no other reason. Right.
and
yeah,
he just sees her and then
In
has
his
like
old house, and he's like,
imprinted
"Woman." Right.
like I have to get
Right.
her.
Now, it makes sense, obviously. You watch this movie and you're like, what should we do for a sequel? You're like, well, we have to explain why he was so fixated on her.
Sure.
But it's better that we don't
But he's
know,
not
right?
He's
Like,
not
don't you
fixated
think?
enough. Like he kills a bunch of other people.
Right.
that
He does, but then he is after her
people
for a
he
good
doesn't
half
even
hour.
see interact with her.
Yes.
Like people who, as far as he knows, don't know her at all. They're just in the same.
they're just
vicinity.
in his path
Right.
or whatever.
That's
Right,
his
yeah.
type.
But yeah, so like,
But
like
then
a-
he does kind of, by the end, she's moving from house to house. And
Sure,
he's-
but
he's
the weird
after
thing this
her.
movie kind of starts to crystallize as a trope is the like virginal final girl thing, which Carpenter has always argued was totally like
Well, right. He's like,
misinterpreted
I
from his
wasn't trying to make a
intentions.
movie where people have sex, get punished, and the
Right.
final girl's a virgin. I just made a movie. You didn't all have to rip it off.
But also, what's interesting is the two kind of like logic problems he's solving are why does Lori survive? Why is she the final girl? Because she's the only one who's not distracted, right? It's not that she's rewarded for being virginal. It's that all the other girls have active social lives
She's also-
and are having fun. Letting other people in the house can be duped.
They're a little more right, but she's also not virginal in a high and mighty way. She's kind of a little shy and introverted.
That's the
versus
whole point.
The other
it's an
babysitters.
extrapolation of the fact that she's just kind of a loner. She's sort of weird. She's sort of like off in her own world.
She's the weird one in her friend group.
Exactly. And the other thing he said is that like it's not about her being rewarded for the fact that she hasn't had sex. The whole like end point of the movie is her thrusting this giant phallic thing into his chest. Like it's as much about her like sexual tension inside of her building up to a boiling point.
But you're right as well. That I mean, of course, the sex and murder is all mixed up in this movie, and there's the opening scene, and also later there's the girl getting strangled while she's topless, and that's all in there. But you're right that it's more like kind of that spooky, especially if you're a parent in the audience thing of like, oh my God, we're putting teenagers in charge of our children in our houses.
Adding another illicit element.
Yeah, but it's also it's like everything just feels so like everyone's opening doors and just being like, just wait there for a minute, I'll be back. Right? It's all too loose.
Well, and this inherently kind of creepy concept of like, I've hired a teenager to watch after my child. Are they responsible enough? And then when you leave, they let some fucking doofus guy through the door.
It's all kind of it's that thing of like,
I didn't
my mom
sign off on this dude.
My mom she grew up in Utica, which is a city, but like kind of like Jesus, kind of like this, and it's like obviously like no one had like ever locked the door.
Well, this is
anything.
total like latchkey kids. Like these kids, as the movie so totally embraces and also doesn't address. Like this is a generation of kids that don't have parents around. This is the late 70s.
Yeah.
These kids are on their own. But like I was saying, I just want to continue to compartmentalize. Sequence 3, Haddonfield, Halloween. Loomis, hospital, over, evil is gone. And then all like the introduction to Laurie Strode and Jamie Lee Curtis, who's dressed so like school marmy, very conservative compared to her friends. Like,
I don't know. She could fucking be killing it right now in these clothes. Don't you think?
Right
like
now.
the long pants.
I'm not saying that there's anything
the high waist
unseemly about the way she's dressed. I'm saying compared to Annie.
No, she's less. Yeah, she's less.
Annie and Linda. But like this is where I think, as we've all researched, like the Deborah Hill influence comes in. The sort of like Laurie's sense of her character and her responsibility, her forgetting her school book, and throughout all of this, like the music is doing so much heavy lifting because it's daytime, it's mundane, it's kids going to school, and then you're just hearing this pulsating, flexing music with these super wide shots from across the street, just watching these people walk around. And you're like, after the prologue, like you're saying, Griffin, it's like, is this someone's POV? Why are we across the street watching them walk around?
You're just on that knife's edge of tension all the time. Right. It's that thing where I just think it remains the most effective thing that horror movies can do with their camera, which is personalize the camera, at least even in spurts.
Of course.
Right.
It connects it to the psychology of, in this case, the villain.
Right.
And then ultimately kind of uses your identification with the villain to watch the heroine.
Right.
From afar in a way that's incredibly tense and uncomfortable. And then it just becomes like a series of opportunities for him to compose these immaculate frames of Michael's... Sorry, we need to talk about the shape. Of the shape's shoulder.
Right.
Just standing there with this heavy breathing on the soundtrack. Heavy breathing that is so iconic. Yeah. It was the end credits stinger of the last Halloween movie.
It was.
Like, you can just put that at the end of the credits with no footage. Yeah. And people are sitting there at the theater going, that breathing, that's the good breathing. Like, it's good breathing. And every shot of holding off on the reveal of him with his shoulder in the frame from across the street watching, it's just like...
Well, like you're talking about the shot of her in the class.
Yeah,
right?
And she looks
that
out the window.
God, so iconic and scary because there's also something about being in the classroom, like in school, and knowing that thing is just lurking outside.
All the lurking, like him by the hedge. Him among the laundry, right?
Yeah.
Then the classic horror movie thing now that I feel like horror movies now try and amp up a little with a sting or a noise of the, you see someone, you look away, the someone is gone, right? You know, like
that's the kind of thing, as I'm saying from my long context, all new,
right?
All
now
all things that every movie I listed prior to this, you don't have any of that.
There's
it's just
something.
it's so exciting. They're
There's
giving
something about that classroom shot that it just holds for a weird amount of time.
Yes.
Like the reveal of him there, and then he's just lingering, and nothing further's happening, and it just your blood
it is
boils
that thing
more and
where
more
it's
by
like
the
if you
second.
see something aberrant once,
Yes.
you don't think there's anything wrong with it.
You're just like, okay, right. I
That's
guess that's
weird.
a weird thing I saw. Right.
That's
but
weird. It's Halloween. There's some guy outside in a mask, and then the third and fourth and fifth time
Yes.
you just see her performance, which is really subtle and well modulated, being like, am I seeing things? What is going like it's but in the classroom when they're having this kind of very silly but very fun conversation where they're like, fate never changes, you're all
Sure.
subject to your own fate.
Yeah.
The kind of thing that honestly you could just echo that in the new ones. Like you could bring all of that back because now that's become Laurie's 40 years story.
I mean, this is a boring point, but like what you're saying is like this movie has sort of flashiness to it that is not in earlier horror, and now feels like so artful and quiet and
Yes.
not splashy at all.
Even to pay homage to this now, you couldn't be this subtle.
This is the whole thing with the Green movie.
Yeah.
Where you're like, he's trying his best to pay homage, but it's still a Blumhouse movie in 2018 that needs to be more elaborate.
Do
and the
way
kills
less.
need
No,
to
I
be
was
more
telling you,
elaborate.
we were talking about this last night. Like you have to look at now all circling back full circle to pre-Halloween. You have to look at independent, like House of the Devil.
Yeah.
Like
I was gonna say,
that's a
the
movie
closest
that,
it is to where it's just like it has very little money and it's just like this
just
creepy
builds
thing.
very
That
slowly.
movie is great, but it's also going for like, you know,
Of
this
course.
is like a 70s vibe. Right.
Whereas
it's
this
trying
movie
to
is just
summon
going
that.
for efficiency. His
Yes,
lean
right.
Howard Hawks,
Yeah.
B Western brain efficiency of like let's just get in, good guys, bad guys, confrontation, get out.
Yeah, also like I mean the Gordon Green Halloween has like 15 different perspective points.
That's the it's got too many
right.
characters.
It's like it's got
yeah.
the podcasters, it's got the crazy doctor, it's got
Not-
her
not that this
friends,
doesn't
her mom,
have-
her grandmother.
Like this
Yeah.
film has an ensemble.
Yes.
It has supporting characters like, you know, Linda and Annie and like, you know, like it has
But
these
it's like you have three girls and the doctor and Michael.
yeah, and then like, you know,
And
the
the
nurse
cop.
has a scene, the cop has a couple
But
scenes,
those
right?
people
you
are
know.
sharing scenes with
Yes, they are. Yeah, 100%. And
yeah,
obviously Tommy
right.
eventually will be played by Paul Rudd in Halloween 6.
Of course.
You know, her babysitter. And things like that. Like the sequels are always trying to go back to this movie and be like, who haven't we like plucked?
And now the
Yes.
Kyle Richards, the girl, is in the new one.
Kyle Richards
She's
is
in
going to
the tr-
be in
She's in
Halloween Kills
Kills
playing Lindsay again,
Which
playing
is
the
great.
girl.
Who is
I
the
hope-
one
I
who
hope
is
Jamie
now
Lee
the
Curtis
Real
is still
Housewife, right?
babysitting her in this movie.
She is now one of the Real Housewives of
Right.
Beverly Hills.
And is the girl who gets shot in Assault on Precinct 13.
Correct.
Yeah.
Lindsay Wallace.
Is she?
the
I thought it
character
was
she
the
plays.
other Richards sister who gets
Oh,
shot.
am
in
I wrong
Assault on
about
Precinct.
that?
I think it's Kim Richards in Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah,
Are-
it is. It
Are
is.
they
Kyle-
both housewives?
They were, yeah.
They're both in the universe.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And but I hope she's still. I hope the plot of the new one is just like Laurie's babysitting her again, even though she's a 50-year-old
I hope
woman
so.
now.
But Laurie is like, yeah, I'll babysit you. And she's got like a shotgun or whatever. Anyway.
But okay, anyway.
Can we zoom out for a second and talk about two fundamental things? I don't know how much new we have to say about them, but I do feel like we have to stop.
We just
and
have to
talk
say
about
the shape as much as possible.
it. Okay.
He's called the shape.
Right. Anthony Michael Hall is going to play Tommy in the new in the Green movie.
Okay.
too, who Paul Rudd plays him in Halloween 6.
They couldn't get red.
Well, it's complicated.
You
because
also
Halloween
couldn't tell-
Kills is ignoring Halloween.
Right.
I know,
6.
I
But the
know.
thing is, you couldn't tell Rudd has aged at all. That would be
That's
a
the
big,
problem.
big
I think the
issue
re-
with
the
him
real
being
reason you
cast.
can't-
Where's your mom?
Brian Andrews like just stopped acting.
I
like the
forgot.
original Tommy.
I forgot that. Well, I knew that it ignored 4, 5, and 6. I forgot that
It ignores 2.
I forgot that it ignores
Ignores
2.
everything.
That's the thing it does that's wild. That there's a Halloween sequel about Jamie Lee Curtis many years later that is very indebted to 2, and then they did another one that ignores 2, and they both are. What if we check in with Laurie Strode later?
Well, choose your own adventure.
Right. And
Pretty
one of
much.
them's 20 and one of them's 40.
One's 20 and one's 40, and they both are about trauma. But she has different traumas, and one is she's
Yeah.
like, I have to get my brother, and the other one is like, that fucking guy came after me that one time.
Do you like the 20 or the 40 better?
I think the 40 is probably better. I have a soft spot for the 20. The 20 is so close to being a good movie.
I always had a soft spot for it. I even had a poster for it in my basement.
Great poster.
And then Anna had never seen it. We watched it before
It's like
the new one came out.
22 minutes long.
Yes.
It's like one of these things where I'm like, how is this over? Like, you had one shot.
The credits come up at like 77 minutes.
So short.
It's also I was like, oh, this movie's good. It's fun. We love 90s, whatever, faculty,
Very
screen,
90s, very
like,
dimension,
and we watched
you
it,
know.
and I was like, this movie's kind of bad.
It's not that good, and you really want it to be good because she's good, and like Adam Arkin is in it, and he's really good. Like there are people in it who are
Michelle
giving
Williams,
a shit.
but
Didn't she
Josh
really
Hartnett.
like? Wasn't she the one that got it made? Jamie
of,
Lee, like
yeah.
she was the one because I feel like Carpenter and Deborah weren't involved.
They're not.
No.
For
Right.
H2O, you're saying?
Yeah.
For two.
It's
yeah.
also
Right.
wild that they called it H2O.
I mean,
Oh,
that was
well,
the biggest
because-
mistake of all.
It's so
It's
funny
not
to me.
wet. It's not wet. That's the problem.
Carpenter has no real involvement between
Until the Gordon
3
raid.
and Kills,
Yeah.
right? It's 3's the last one.
No,
that he
until
sort of-
Halloween 2018.
I'm sorry, that's what I
Yes.
mean.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
but 3's the last of the original run that he is
After
touching
that,
in sort of way.
yeah.
We just can't get over that he's called The Shape.
I know. Well, okay, so here are 3 things I want to say
Oh, I thought it was 2. You've added another thing.
because of the shape thing.
Oh, okay.
The shape thing is big. I think it ties to Carpenter's whole thing about just like this isn't a character, right? This is like a thing. This is a force. And that in his script, he does not use the words Michael Myers between the opening prologue and when Loomis names him at the end of the film.
Okay.
That he's always described as the shape because he's like,
So
at that
cool.
point, he's not Michael Myers anymore. He's the shape. The shape is some other fucking thing. Whatever existed in that kid before is gone.
It's just so awesome that everyone's like the boogeyman, and in this on the page he's like The Shape.
the shape, right? That he's-
Doesn't call him the boogie. It's just what a decision.
it's not even like them calling like
It would
the
be funny if
alien
the
the big
kids were
chap
like-
on set.
The shape.
Right. Like he wrote it as the shape. The whole thing was the shape. He's credited as the shape. It's the shape. Right. Nick Castle, as you said, is like, I live close by. I'm friends with this guy. I've never been able to spend every day on a movie set. I want to watch the whole process. They'll pay me $10. I can do this. There are like 4 or 5 shots where it's not him, which speaks to the fact that Carpenter was like, it doesn't matter. Just have someone do a thing. Like put the hands in and touch it, like whatever. You know, there's no like continuity of character that's necessary here because
no,
I'm
it's
telling
like a
everyone to
20-day
do
shoot,
nothing.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like they're blazing through this.
Right, just
Yes.
get it done. The 2 things I think we need to talk about a little bit are
Back
the
down to
mask.
2.
Now that I got the shape thing out of
Okay.
the way, I'm saying the mask and Jamie Lee,
Yeah.
and sort of the process of getting to those 2 things. Alex, do you know? Because I feel like I hear contrasting things all the time, and I don't know if it's just like,
She is Janet Lee's daughter.
She is.
okay,
Yes.
that's
Can
huge.
confirm.
Yes, I do know
And
that.
that's pretty much why John Carpenter cast her. And then later he was like, this is a good actress.
But wait, is
Yeah.
her father
Tony Curtis.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
heard
I can confirm
Right.
all of that.
It's
Okay,
Lee and Curtis, but Lee is spelled differently than her mother's Lee.
Oh, got it.
And she's also technically Lady Hayden Guest because she's married to Christopher Guest, who is a lord.
People
Right.
always forget.
Not he
that
was he's a former lord.
He is.
Right.
People always forget that she's just been married to Christopher Guest this
the
whole
whole
time.
The whole time.
It's wild.
That the Parliament said, "Be our guest," and she said yes.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I didn't think
exactly.
you could top the oat milk
Okay.
thing, but
And there's going to be a third one.
Okay. All right.
I don't know
okay.
where it is. I don't know where it's
I'm
going to
sorry.
come from,
So,
but it's
Griff,
going to
do you
happen.
want to talk about the mask or what was the actual?
Well, let's say Curtis first because right, there was the actress he wanted to hire first, who was the daughter of the woman from Lassie,
Mhm.
who was a
I'll find her
young
name.
actress at that point. I want to say Lockhart.
Yeah, Anne Lockhart. Yeah. He wanted her. She was busy. He learns about how Jamie Lee is Janet Lee's daughter.
That's the
he
whole
knows
thing.
that would be
Wouldn't
great
that be
publicity.
so fucking cool to get the daughter of the woman from Psycho?
She, her mother had kept her from being in. I want to look this up because it's had stopped her from being in. What is it? Some other movie where she would have played the kid. The Exorcist. Jesus, obviously,
oh,
right?
wow, yeah.
Because her mother was very protective of her.
Yeah.
Blah 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 blah. And this is her first movie, obviously.
Right.
After the first
She was
day,
on TV at this point.
she had done some TV pilot that didn't
Yeah.
go and whatever.
Okay.
After the first day, Carpenter calls her on the phone, I think.
She thinks she's about to get fired, that she's blowing it.
Exactly. And says, Darlin, I just want to tell you how great today was. She says, it's never happened to me again. It was so nice. Like, I loved making this movie. She's always so positive about him and this movie.
But also is like, I don't like horror movies. They're not what I like as an audience member.
Right.
I've never had an affinity for the genre, but I also, once I got famous, did not distance myself from it and disown it.
Right.
She's obviously
thumbs
had her
down, like,
protectiveness
Prom Night
of Laurie
and
Strode, but that she
Fog.
does other horror movies after this.
There's
what have
that
you.
Scream Queen sort of like
Yes.
thing
Yeah.
that kind of follows her and some of the other actors.
But she
actresses
doesn't
working
brush
in
it
horror.
off, and there's no one arguably who comes from horror, elevates to her level, and wears it as comfortable.
Yeah, especially recently. Like, she really is out there with the new
Right.
ones being like, yeah, this is just my thing. Like,
Right.
I've done other things. Everyone loves me. From people come up to me, they say Laurie Strode, or they say Freaky Friday, or they say True Lies, like whatever.
But I also love that, like, you know, nepotism, everyone's favorite subject on Twitter in the film industry.
They like to realize that people are related to other people.
Right. She has always been like, yeah, I absolutely only got
course.
cast because my mother was the one from Psycho. I understood that. That was an opportunity. That was an advantage that most people did not get. And my job was to then be as good as I could possibly be.
Well, she was good. She
Yeah.
started good, and she became. I watched
good.
the bonus scenes filmed for the TV edit that they shot during Halloween 2.
Which hint at the
because
family
by then
That's
they
when
knew
they're
what they were
retconning
doing.
in
But
the
even
brother
in those
thing, yeah.
scenes, for obviously by Halloween 2, I was watching them and I was like, wow, she just leveled up as talent so quickly.
Well, even
like
Fog,
in
she
those
gives like
scenes, she's-
such a different performance. It's
Yeah.
very
It's-
interesting.
she just
so good.
immediately just became in like a much more she's very good in this movie.
I mean, it's also-
but watching the scenes of the same character 2 years later, and I'll rewatch 2 closer to Halloween, I suspect.
Sure.
But she just got so, I was just like, wow, this is like, it cuts from the scene in the movie to the scene they filmed 2 years later, and she's just doing so much more.
I think not exclusively, but oftentimes the defining trait of a movie star versus like an actor, a screen actor, is like how compelling they are to watch in stillness.
Well, she spends a third of this movie either alone or
Right.
talking to children,
Right.
which is incredible. That's most
She's
of
so good with the kids too.
But
Like
she's
that
also-
scene where he's
yes.
like, "Well, can you make popcorn? Can we eat ice cream?" And she's like, "Yes, yes."
it was
right.
it
It's
was
a great scene.
killing me how many times they say the word popcorn in this
But,
movie,
like-
and there I was watching it with none.
Right.
She's good with people.
The kids want so she says you already ate popcorn, and they say how about some more? It makes so much, but she does spend like probably from minute 50 to minute 80 without any other adults
Right.
present.
And she
She's-
is compelling to looking at things, which is a thing that you kind of can't like teach or develop. She also just has a fascinating face. I do think it's interesting that she's the only one who is actually a teenager in this. And in certain ways, she genuinely does read as the most mature, even though she's like 19 playing off of PJ Souls, who's like 27 and married to Dennis Quaid and like living a fucking life. And it's just like she has a certain mature intelligence just on her fucking face
yeah, she's great.
that
Well,
makes her a really strong central kind of grounding force for this whole thing.
do you want to talk about the mask?
Yeah. What about
Yeah,
the
so
mask?
this is the question I was going to ask you.
Well, I like when he says smoking. I think that's really cool.
What about when he says somebody stop me?
Yeah, that's another
See,
standout
the
line
thing
for
about
me.
that line is nobody can.
Nobody
No,
can.
that's what
no
he's
one
really
actually
pointing
can.
That's
out.
what's so great about
yeah,
it.
it's a real flex.
What about when he dances and his eyes pop out of his head?
Well,
All right,
right,
well,
that's
all right,
fun.
no,
What about
wait,
when he turns to a cartoon wolf and his jaw drops and his tongue rolls out like a red
Steam come out of
carpet?
his ears.
Yeah, the eyes pop out. My question about the mask is, what if there was a son of the mask? My question about the mask is, because I feel like I've heard both things. I don't know if it's just that people like whichever version of the story. Did Shatner ever make any money off of
Oh, I have
this?
no idea.
No, I don't think so.
I
And
feel
the
like if he did, he would say so.
Right.
the story that
And this was sort of in the lowest point of his career.
yeah, the story
Right.
that JJ found here that's really funny from Carpenter is, I mean, obviously the story first is Tommy Lee Wallace, who
Yeah.
worked on this movie, eventually makes Halloween 3 and rules, had a clown mask, and then he's like, and I got a Captain Kirk mask, and I painted it white and kind of
Right.
cut the eye holes bigger, and they were like, ooh, that thing is
Fuck.
spooky.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
But that Carpenter walked up to Shatner at a convention once and was like, "Hi, I'm John Carpenter," and he says he was on his cell phone and didn't look up. He
Wow.
says, I don't give a shit.
Wow.
But
It is fascinating. I mean, I just remember as a kid for the first time learning that fact. And then once you know it, even though like Michael Myers exists as his own distinct entity,
You can't-
once you know it, you can't stop seeing the Shatner
Well,
face in it.
I want to ask your opinion on this, Alex.
Yeah.
they've never gotten the mask right again.
It's
and
weird.
It's weird. And sometimes
They change
the
it
mask
too
is
much.
so
Yeah.
bad that you're like, this is like Halloween 5 or whatever. I'm like, this is Halloween 5. The mask is the only thing you have to nail.
It is wild in like
And it's like ill-fitting.
in like
I'm
4
what
and
is
5,
this?
it has no texture,
It's
and like
so
the hair
weird how
gets
bad it
really
looks.
wonky.
Yes.
And the other controversial thing is the ebb and flow of the eyes.
Yes.
Especially in H2O, where it's all eyes, where you can see the actual eyeballs inside the mask.
But then H2 also has a couple scenes where it's like a CGI mask, right? Like, doesn't the design
They
change?
smooth
Well, no,
out
you're
the
thinking-
mask
you're
in
thinking of
weird
Son of the
ways.
Mask.
But it's just so strange because obviously Jason, it's a hockey mask.
Sure.
But
It
it
does
changes.
change.
It changed.
Sometimes there's different like colors on it and stuff. But
Sometimes
you know,
it's blue.
sometimes blue, sometimes red. But it's pretty easy.
The basic silhouette of the thing remains vaguely the same.
Leatherface's mask, they keep that consistent through the.
Freddy basically looks the same, except in 2 when he looks really different and it's weird.
Yeah, it evolves and devolves, but it's all
Sometimes this
from the same
mask
basic.
looks so
right.
smooth and just like it just looks dumb
Right.
and kind of weak.
It's just
Whereas
a
this
testament
looks-
to how damn
whereas
good
this
this
looks
movie
creepy.
is. That
Yeah.
this looks so good, and with more money, they never get this right.
Yeah.
They got it
Gordon
right in
Green
the
movie. I didn't love how he looked.
They
It's
got
okay.
They do a little too much.
That's an example of like in this movie they go to the Five and Dime and they paint a Halloween mask.
Right.
In the David Gordon Green movie they probably spend $10,000
That's-
on molds
right.
and
This is-
fabrication.
It's fascinating
And
to
you,
me.
you in the cheaper sequels you underthink it. In the $20 million Blumhouse movie you overthink it.
Yeah.
And this one is just like I said, many things in this movie all oft imitated, never improved upon.
I also think
You also
part of
don't
it-
get that close to it in this
Sure.
movie.
I believe for the, there's always stories where they're like, we found the original mask and we made a mold of it, right?
It's a
Like,
classic
they're-
Maltese Falcon.
Right.
There's just-
Exactly. But it's like, it's the magic of movies is
Yes.
best summarized by that,
Yes.
right? Where it's like, these fuckers just spray painted a mask and it's the most iconic image ever
Right.
and no one can figure out
right,
how to
and
replicate
it just
it.
they cut the holes too big or
Yeah,
too
they cut them a
small.
little
It's
bigger,
always-
right? Yeah,
They
it's like,
shave the eyebrows off.
right. But
I'm looking at this. I'm looking at pictures here of him in Halloween 4 and in H2O where you can see his eyes, and it's just so pitiful.
I don't like it.
I also think there's something to like, oh God, it's so fucking bad. And he looks like there's something, he's got like a sad expression.
He's frowning.
Like he
Oh my
looks kind of
God.
dopey. Yeah.
Oh boy.
There's
And he's
something
blonde, which people hate.
right. You have the weird poutiness of Shatner to begin with, right? Once you know it's Shatner, you can never unsee the Shatner lips in particular.
The lips, right? The mouth face.
But then there's also
mouth
this
shape.
thing of like, they don't really make masks like this today for Halloween costumes, where it's like, if you're a kid and you're dressing up as Captain Kirk, you get the fucking uniform and a wig. You don't wear a mask that's replicating this adult man's face, right? They mostly sell masks for characters who have faces that cannot be replicated with like, grease paint or whatever. And I do find that when you do see masks, like rubber overhead masks like this that are replicating human faces, they're usually caricatured. You're seeing like your like absurd Donald
Right,
Trump
it's-
masks.
Yeah, right.
Whereas
right.
there's something
Lot of
weird
detail.
about like this being like the Don Post company trying to, as realistically as possible, capture the flesh of William Shatner. It's such a weird image.
There's like an
What's
image
the
I found here
one-
of all 9 different designs across all the
Yeah.
movies, and it's just so
They're
wild.
so bad.
Some of them look so feeble.
But there's
Some
like,
of them have really intense eyebrows, like eyebrows painted onto the mask.
Yep.
there's just a weird amount of detail in trying to capture a very neutral expression, which in and of itself is odd. And there's like the one cheek that is more defined than the other, that sort of line in there. Like all this shit that's just odd, where it's like, that's an odd product. When you look at the unpainted mask as it existed, it's odd. It's weird that it has real hair. Like everything about it is strange.
It's great.
It's great.
We've talked about it.
Right.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Much like the sort of eerily empty streets and the overabundance of music, but perfect music. It's just this
couldn't plan
exercise in minimalism
Yeah.
and cost efficiency
Yeah.
that inexplicably in this movie hit the bullseye.
Yeah.
I want to just briefly talk about what I wrote down as the sequence where Loomis says he's on his way. I love when he just him commandeering the truck and killing the person. I love the clothesline. The speed at which he disappears from the clothesline is the point where it's like, you almost start to wonder, is this literal or is this now is she seeing him to such an extent that it's starting to affect her mind? And she thinks
Sure, she's imagining
because
seeing
he's
him
just
everywhere.
it's like
Right.
clothesline, 1-2 seconds, looks back, not a trace, and he doesn't move that. It's just you start to wonder how much of this is affecting her psychologically.
Okay, so this is exciting. I want to just really quickly. I just want to ask because I feel like you've seen this a ton, David. You've seen this a ton,
Sure.
Griff as well. Do any
I've
of
not
you?
seen this many times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do any of you have you ever noticed the poster in her room?
I noticed it yesterday, and it's a cat, right?
It is not.
There's a
So
cat in
it's
one of the
man.
rooms. There's a
it's
cat in one of the
man-
rooms she's babysitting.
Oh,
In one of the
And
whatever.
of course, she watches the original Thing with her.
Yeah.
Well, they watched the thing,
They do.
yeah, they do.
and we checked back in on how that movie's playing out.
It's a man with like a hat. It's like a painting, but a poster, and it says James Ensor.
Oh, yeah.
I never like knew this before. I looked it up.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
noticed
my
that.
favorite fucking painter of all time. He is he's a Belgian painter. He apparently had a lot of influence on expressionism and surrealism, like kind of like an early practitioner. And he is just a fucking dang ass freak.
A lot of masks, a lot of skulls.
A lot of fucking skulls.
Yeah.
But like people like kind of dressed up in fancy clothes, but they're wearing skulls. Just like this really completely outsider art almost, but at the same time he has training and like comes from money, but like seems like was a fucking crazy person.
So he gets the official DAF qualification.
Absolutely. Okay. So I just feel like that was a fun little Easter egg that I noticed for the first time and was very excited by. So I recommend people check out
James
Ensor,
Ensor.
Ensor.
Ben, what do you think of when they reveal that he's dug up the grave? Are you a fan of grave robbing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
like knocking over headstones or stealing them?
Well, I would say I don't. It's not cool to knock over a tombstone. You know.
What if it's your family, like it is here?
What do you mean?
Well, he steals his sister's.
Right.
He steals Judas' headstone.
Then I sign off on it.
Okay.
You know. Yeah.
It is one
Keep
of
it
those.
in the family.
It is one of those like lingering things of ickiness in this movie that is never the headstone is seen, but the dug up grave is never
Yeah.
addressed.
Right. You don't see the body or anything
never.
like that. Right.
Nor do you know what has happened.
The headstone is his most elaborate whatever.
Yeah.
I was going to say bit, but it's beyond a bit, really. It's also kind of like, what's the person that she's like, huh? Like, or no, not a, who is it who sees the babysitter with the Judith headstone? Is it
Lori.
It's
Right?
Yeah,
Lori,
it's Lori. It's
right,
when
yeah.
everyone else has been killed and put
but
into
like
that
but
room.
like she's like, is she like
Who the fuck is Judith?
right, like Judith Myers?
Well, that's what they're
was
saying.
the-
They're
is
because
the-
everyone's like, that's the house, that's the murder. Like,
Yeah,
and
so
as
it
Carpenter
is
has said,
famous.
like every town has one of those
They do.
houses.
Yep.
So you
especially
have-
small towns. if
You have to
something
imagine it's
creepy
only
happens.
been 15 years. They know
We had a hole in our town, but continue. Sorry.
Yes, that's the hole where
That's where the
hole
mayor was.
where the world opened up and people were sucked into it. and we just-
you got a problem? Come to the hole. There.
but I do love him coming to town, killing the mechanic along the way. Not that you need to explain where he gets, and this is now like something that in a new movie they'd be like, really got to explain where he gets the
Yeah,
jumpsuit.
we need a jumpsuit set piece or
But
whatever.
like,
right.
it's just nice that they find the dead body.
Like the new one literally does do that, right? It's like
Yes.
he kills a guy at a gas station. So
and
you
then,
understand
yeah,
why
because
he
him
has
he's
putting
like
on the
in his
jumpsuit is
underwear.
supposed to be a moment where
Yeah.
everyone's like, yeah.
and it was at my screening.
It certainly was.
It's
yeah.
very now it's all become like Terminator 2 where you have to explain where they get the cool clothes.
Right.
But I just like this sort of sequence where Loomis is on the trail and he finds the dead body and he finds the dug up grave and then he's just like, I know he's going home. That's it. I know
Gotta
now.
load my 6-shooter.
I just love that Loomis, like his pulse never quickens. It's just kind of like, I knew this day was coming. From the moment I saw that this existed on this plane, I knew my life would be committed to trying to mitigate the damage of this soul.
At this point, this is where I was just blown away because now there's the music right now is just going wild and then it just basically cuts to darkness. And it just goes from daytime to nighttime when when everyone has sort of made their plans for the babysitting with all the business of I'll come here, you'll come there, you'll let me in. And then it's just suddenly like you see tail lights and the music gets a little bit more menacing. And now it's just nighttime and the breathing starts again.
We should also mention, right, Michael does spend a lot of this movie driving around in a station wagon.
Which is like a big point of contention amongst fans of how he learned how to drive and
Of course
when.
it is, yes.
Right.
Well, they mention that in the movie.
Right.
They say, he can't drive. And Loomis goes, he was doing a good job of it yesterday.
But hasn't like different sequels offer different explanations to try to like
they let him out for driving lessons.
right.
driver's
I went down some rabbit hole of like the driving.
He already
question.
knew how to drive when he
People
was
get hung
7
up.
because
Or-
his dad was an alcoholic. That
right,
sort of
or
backstory.
that like there was maybe it's in like a novelization or something. Someone was saying that like they like explained that in the van when they drove him to the institution in the first place there was a plexiglass partition so he could watch
Yes, that sounds
the
familiar.
driving and study it.
It's
know,
really not that
novelization-
hard to drive. I
It-
mean,
it- that-
anyone
well, that- right,
can
hey,
fucking
hey!
do it. What?
Not
Oh, right,
anyone
I
can.
forgot.
The real argument is right. If you put someone behind the wheel of the car, they might know how the basic mechanism is supposed to work. But
Don't
yes,
test me on that.
the novelization explains what you're talking about.
Yeah,
just
right,
that he
right.
watched Dr. Loomis drive.
Right, which
or
is
whatever.
like once again more info than
Who
I need.
cares?
So wait,
I
are you
as
like I think you should leave, guys? Season 2.
I have never related to
I never-
anything more.
I never saw the
It
movie
hurts.
as a young person and was like, how can Michael drive?
Right.
It was just like, I don't
Of course
I
he can
can't
drive. He's scary.
Yes.
He's supernatural.
He has
I think
scary
anyone who can
powers.
drive a car is magical powers, either from heaven or hell.
But you know what else he does that really blew on his mind last night? Is he eats a dog.
What?
None of you catch this? Well, and look this up. There's a Halloween Wikipedia about the dog
He
that
kills
eats,
the dog.
and
right.
he has eaten him.
I do think this comes up in
They
Goy and
arrive
Russ.
at the Myers house, and Loomis is there with Sheriff Lee Brackett, and they're like, "What's up with that dog?" And he goes, "He must have gotten hungry."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's right. right.
And you look
That's
it up
the
on
line.
Halloween Wiki. It's called like Val's dog or something.
Wow.
Kills the mechanic, kills this dog. When he gets to town, he goes to his old house, kills a dog, eats the dog. And Anna was like, "Wait, what?" And it's just that kind of detail. Like, can you imagine that being in the new movie? In like a 3,000 screen Halloween $20 million release where they're like, "What's up with that dog?" And they say, "Oh, well, Michael Myers ate him."
He's hungry.
David,
Yeah.
I've heard of Halloween,
Okay. You've heard of Halloween, the holiday, the famed holiday.
but Hello Fresh?
So both H's, and I guess
L-
both two
LLO.
syllables, right? Yeah, you got the LLO, right? Okay, good
I've
point.
heard of Halloween, but Hello Fresh?
Okay, so continue your thought. Have you heard of it?
Now I have.
They're frequent sponsors of the show.
Hello Fresh, you get fresh pre-measured ingredients and mouth-watering seasonal recipes. Seasonal like Halloween.
It would just be funny if you were like, "I've heard of Halloween, but HelloFresh, heard of them too." Like that was the end of your sentence.
Well, thank you for the punch-up. It came a little late. The point is,
HelloFresh.
the mouth-watering seasonal recipes are delivered right to your door. Right to the doorstep, like when Michael Myers shows up at a doorstep with a knife, except instead of a knife, it's a meal kit.
It's a much better situation because you don't have to fear being attacked, and you do get to save time you'd otherwise spend meal planning and shopping and chopping. Now, I'm not talking chopping Michael Myers style, where you're chopping up your enemies.
Right, and that's actually a thing I probably should have latched onto for the
But
ad read.
no, I'm talking chopping vegetables because you know when you're making a recipe and you're like, okay, here I go making my recipe, and then it's like chop up an onion. I'm like, oh boy, this is gonna take forever. Gotta chop an onion now. HelloFresh, it's in the little package already, all chopped for you, and you just pour it right in.
Right, you keep your butcher knife, your cleaver. What kind of knife does he use? It's not a butcher knife.
It's a big old kitchen knife. I mean, it's just sort of a
I know.
regular big knife. Yeah.
Well,
big
what's
knife.
funny is I think of that as a stabbing knife. I don't even think of that having a practical use within cooking.
It's just a knife.
But the point is, keep it sharp. So the only thing you got to use it for is the goddamn jack-o'-lantern carving.
Sure, exactly. And HelloFresh, they got 50 menu and market items to choose from every week. Vegetarian meals, they got calorie smart choices. They have extra special gourmet options, Griffin.
Oh, wow.
Something for
Oh, wow.
everyone to enjoy. These recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts. So it's delicious, it's simple, it's good for you, and it's 30% cheaper than shopping at a grocery store. Okay?
David, I don't know if you know this, but the fall harvest is officially on with HelloFresh. You can count on seasonal recipes like pumpkin cinnamon rolls. It's hard to sing the Halloween theme. And Friendsgiving ready sides, as well as fresh, high-quality ingredients that travel from the farm to your front door in less than a week, which is even faster than Michael Myers travels.
Yes. HelloFresh, I use it all the time. Just to give you a little personal experience, it's a great meal kit. Recipes come in. One of the people in my household can't eat gluten. HelloFresh very good about that sort of stuff. Always telling you allergens in meals. Obviously, like you said,
very mysterious. Yeah,
they have vegetarian stuff. If you want to do, if you're on specific diets, they have stuff for that. Look. If you go, Griff, let's just stop talking about it. Let's get down to business. Okay, let's get down to
business. Yeah.
If you go to HelloFresh.com/14check and use code 14check for up to 14 free meals.
14?
I'm struggling with this because 14 is so many.
It's so many.
Go to HelloFresh.com/14check. Use code 14check for up to 14 free meals, including free shipping. Okay, this is America's #1 meal kit, Griffin. If you've worked with Green Chef, if you had some Green Chef in the past, that's owned by HelloFresh. So there's a wider range of meal plans to choose from. There's something for everyone. You can switch between the brands if you want. Okay, go to HelloFresh.com/14check and use code 14check for up to 14 free meals, including free shipping.
14 is even more than there are Halloween movies. And I think we finally worked our way backwards into the connection, which is HelloFresh, the opposite of Michael Myers, in that you do want it to show up on your doorstep.
There you go. Thank you.
And I just want to end this by saying that our editor, AJ McKeon, messaged us. It's an 8-inch Victorinox Forstner with rosewood handle.
The guy likes knives.
He likes knives. HelloFresh.
Basically, what happens here to me is like a breathlessly efficient series of parallel action where the kids are split up in a geography that basically makes no sense. Where it's like she's doing laundry, but the laundry is like in another house.
Well, I was trying to figure that out, right? It's like she definitely locks herself in the laundry. I guess it maybe is like a shed or a garage or something.
It's like a guest house where the laundry, which makes absolutely no sense. But regardless, the parallel action of Annie and Laurie split up while babysitting, and the only thing you're ever using to bridge the two houses is this vast empty desert in between them.
Right.
It's Halloween night. It can't be that late because they say early on, we're going to make these plans to meet up at 6:30. And then it gets dark. And then within 5 minutes of the movie, it is abandoned. There's not a single trick-or-treater. There's not a single parent.
They don't have it is very eerie how few people there are.
Now, this is obviously a budgetary thing.
Yes.
It's also incredibly unsettling and odd how often they look across the street at these houses and it seems like it is 3 a.m, whereas it must probably be like 8
at night or whatever.
And
like
they're watching
the parents
thing.
aren't even home from whatever they're out doing.
They're watching The Thing, which is 80 minutes long.
Sure.
And time passes, and then the world is just empty, except for these 6 people. And the amount of parallel action of going between Annie, who's then killed in the car, and Laurie, who doesn't know that the kid, she's watching the kid for Annie while Annie does whatever, cleans the butter off of her shirt. You're all just going from place to place. And for this whole period, it's so quotidian what's happening. It's so quotidian. And then occasionally there's just a shot of essentially a tumbleweed blowing down the street with piercing synth music. Yeah. And every time that happens, you're just like, it's a POV shot and you're like, oh, this is bad. He's out there. He's just going from house to house.
He's looming.
And then there's the really wide shot of him carrying the body into the house. There's all these great tableaus in this, these very eerie.
And the way he walks is so effective. We sort of talked about it.
This is when Loomis is outside the house flapping his arms and doing the voice and saying, kids, keep away.
I do enjoy Loomis's theatricality, yes.
With the carrying of the body, that always freaked me out, especially because the shot just feels so like you would look outside your own house and look across the street and just witness some horrific thing that just is happening. And
then what do you do?
Right. What are you going to do exactly?
But then right around here, which is when Bob and Linda are fooling around before Bob gets killed and his glasses get taken.
They sure do.
There's easily 10 minutes where there's no music, which after the prominence of the music is so equally unsettling. Yeah. It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Right. And at this point, it's just great. They're just going about their business. But this is where I made a note that I thought was kind of amazing. I never thought this about this movie before, but now I'm thinking it about a lot of Carpenter movies, which is, the Hitchcock principle that establishing shots are inherently uncinematic and therefore you shouldn't use them. How Hitchcock would say,
he hates establishing shots. Right, yeah.
If you're setting a scene inside Ben's apartment, you can't start the scene with just a shot of the outside of the building. That scene has no cinema to it.
Right.
What does that shot tell you? This movie solves that. Every establishing shot of the house, because you're really just in these two houses, every establishing shot is a cinematic moment that moves the story forward, increases the tension, plays the music, and it completely fixes Hitchcock's problem with establishing shots by making each one the same shot over and over.
But
Just
like super foreboding. Right.
Uniquely horrible and foreboding. And it is in the fabric of the movie. It's not just like, we're in this house and now we're in that house. And now just to remind you, we're back in this house. It's like, this is not an establishing shot. This is Michael watching the shot. You know how you know it's Michael? Because you're hearing his horrible little Jaws theme. And I was very taken with how well those establishing shots are deployed this time. I'd never really locked in on it before.
I love that.
Then Bob and Linda have some sex.
They sure do.
Fast sex.
Yeah, I mean, Bob,
okay.
I don't want to shame anyone, but I don't think Bob's doing a great
Might be
job.
too
Bob is
pumped up.
And he's kind of like, oh yeah, and she's sort of trying to be like, yeah. It kind of feels like
Go
she's
get me a fucking beer.
yeah. She's sort of like, good job, Bob.
Well, unfortunately for Bob, he doesn't come back.
And it's to me the perfect jump scare where it's not that complicated. It's kind of like obviously the greatest jump scare ever, which is Leatherface pulling the guy, whacking the guy in the head and pulling
It's a
it.
girl, yeah.
It's a girl. No, the guy.
No, it's a girl.
Wait, no. The guy coming in, Leatherface hitting him in the head and then pulling the door shut. That's a guy. Wait, now I'm going to look up the scene.
I'm trying to picture it. I thought you were going to say the greatest jump scare is boom, a pipe flies through the window.
God damn. I mean, look, I don't know why I did this to myself.
Yep.
I didn't have to say it.
You will rue the
There's
day.
no. See, yeah, the girl comes in. Yeah, it's the guy. The guy comes in,
Oh, okay.
and then Leatherface just walks out.
Okay.
And you're like, what? And he just whacks him, closes
Sure,
the door.
sure,
And
sure.
you're like, whoa. And it's the same when Michael comes out.
I stand corrected, yes.
Just comes out of the
Yeah.
door,
Right.
and then simply stabs him, and that's
But
that.
then,
And
it's not that, because then he stands there for like 10
well,
seconds
and
there's
looks at
this-
him. Oh, it's so good.
That's the kind of moment that a movie
tilt,
can't
yeah.
really pull off
the,
anymore.
the tilting of the head,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that every sequel and reboot and everything has tried to make a shot that just completely disturbing, that has it's just a simple faraway shot, and it is so creepy just to see him standing there looking at what he has done
But there's also
and thinking, how can I get those glasses over a sheet?
when other movies replicate this, right? Other Halloween movies, it feels like they're making him more menacing. Whereas for
problem.
this, it's like, is he an innocent?
Yeah,
like,
is
does
he
he
an-
understand anything?
It's the problem with
He
the
seems
sequelizing
confused,
is
right,
they
yeah.
turn them into these legends, and then it's like, right, what is Michael thinking?
Yeah.
And right, once you're doing that, you're in trouble because then
he's
he's a personality.
he's on animal instinct here.
Right,
That's why he
right,
kills and eats an animal.
Right.
But from the time that Bob and Linda are dead after this is what I was saying. This is a huge period where there's no dialogue, and Laurie, Jamie Lee is completely isolated from everyone else. The kids are asleep, and this begins like a 20-minute sequence where she's interacting with nobody, and the movie hasn't had that much dialogue anyway. But now it has none, and she's completely isolated. Everyone's dead. She doesn't know this, and she's just like looking out the window and goes to the other house, and then there's a cue here that's the first time in a long time that there's a different piece of music, which was very interesting at this point in the movie.
Okay,
And then she
right,
finds
a slightly different cue.
It's and then she finds the gravestone, everyone dead, crammed into the room.
Because she hears the murder on the phone, but she thinks it's just a
Yes.
joke or whatever,
Or maybe some
hanky panky.
hot hanky panky.
But it's strange enough to pique her interest, and right. And then
But also to Griffin's point again, I just want to keep pointing these things out. Like him, as we talked about with the sheet and the glasses, that's another that's a piece of iconography of this
Yes,
movie.
yes.
You could put it on a figure or
Yeah.
on a shirt, and everyone would be like, "I love that moment
Right.
as much as I love the little boy in the clown suit."
Right, that like the Bob ghost disguise is iconic in its own way, separate from the iconography of Michael Myers.
Yes.
In the same way that little boy clown Michael Myers
Yes.
is also separately iconic, not as a variation of.
But once she goes into the other house and finds everybody, as we were talking about, it's now just basically just a chase. It's just
it's just him chasing her from house to house. I mean, the moment I love the most is her banging on the door, the lights coming on, but no help coming. I love that so much
totally.
because it's so unspoken.
But this is like, to Griffin's point of like his preference of horror, this is where the movie is playing by silent film horror rules. Because from the time that the kids are asleep and all the other teenagers are dead, there's nobody for her to talk to. And
Right.
everything that happens here could just be a silent
Right.
horror blocking. It's just somebody being pursued by someone else.
Right,
With the camera
it's
moving
Nosferatu.
perfectly. It's
It's
faces
like-
reacting,
right,
and it's wonderful music.
Right. It's a
For 20
disturbing figure slowly coming out of the shadows and the person not.
for 20 minutes. It's
Yeah.
not until Tommy wakes up and Loomis shows back up that we snap out of what is basically just pure cinema.
And
pure-
Tommy waking up, it's just, she just has that brief moment where she thinks she got him. And
Yeah.
Tommy
Yeah.
knows you can't kill the boogeyman.
She stabs him in the neck with a knitting needle.
Mm-hmm.
Sure does.
She hides in the closet. I remember seeing this as a teenager and going, why can't he get through those like plywood closet doors?
Tommy Wallace plays Michael Myers in that scene
Right.
because he had designed the closet and knew how to take it apart. Literally, in that one scene.
It's also just
He's
wild.
just trying very hard to get through what looks like a wicker door.
It's true. It takes him a while.
There's like 7 minutes left in the movie at this point. Is one of those things, just speaking about Carpenter knowing to like get out while the getting's good, right?
Yeah.
Where you're just like any other movie, even if you are to believe that this is the final stretch of our hero fighting our villain, you're still like, what, 20 minutes of wrap up and then 10 minutes of credit? And you're like 7 minutes all in until the disc stops.
Right. Until
from this point?
until MPAA logo rolls.
Right. Like
yeah.
kind of just remarkable.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is, but it is great. Like it's just, it's escalated. It's become kind of this silent sequence, and now she's doing this kind of thematically nice thing of protecting the children.
Mm-hmm.
Loomis fires off the shots. This is when the mask gets lifted up, which Anna thinks is a very interesting, potentially controversial moment.
I
feel like
love that moment. It's
I
so
love it
crucial to
too.
me.
It's not that she didn't like it. It's just it's very curious if you know the sequels, how much that would even in the new one where you
Right.
never you frame him from behind, or in the Rob Zombie one.
I know which. Rob Zombie has a lot of.
That's where it became controversial. I feel like people were very, very dissatisfied with his treatment of Michael Myers overall. Really,
I really like those movies, but they're just completely different. You just have to think of them as like
Of
really,
course.
the first one is a little more trying to be a remake, I guess.
yeah.
And
I
then
never saw the second one.
the second
I
one.
know
is
people like it.
up your alley.
I don't know. I don't know why I never did.
I mean, it's just an incredibly. It's one of the most depressing movies I've ever
yeah,
seen.
I've always wanted to.
Where it's like, what would the psychology of Michael Myers be like? Rather than John Carpenter, who's like, this is an unknowable evil. He's like, no. These are circumstances Americans grow up in. Let's delve in.
Yeah,
Like,
I should watch it.
He's going in the entire other
Maybe
direction.
this October I'll watch both Halloween 2s.
This is a question for you guys.
Okay.
So the mask off moment, I'm not as deep in the weeds in the Halloween franchise, obviously, as you guys
what's
are.
his? Sorry, Tony Moran plays him in that moment. Plays his face essentially, and of course you see his eye has been wounded.
Well, that was my question.
Okay.
I guess.
What's your question?
I read something with Carpenter where he was saying like it's sort of this interesting case in like the power of suggestion in cinema that I'll talk to people about how like disturbing it is when you see Michael's face in the first movie and how disfigured he is. And I think to some degree it's people combining it with like Jason Voorhees and whatever.
Always
right?
Mandela effect with these things.
Right. But he's like, when you look at him, his face is actually totally normal, except you see the damage of the stab.
Exactly. It's supposed to be the hanger. Her second attack
she
has
pokes him in the
messed with
face.
his eye. Right.
But there's something to, I think the weird expression he has on at the moment.
It's such a good expression. That's sort of again kind of contemplative sort of thing where he's
Right.
like, "What?"
His expression is weird, and then also I think the limitations of the budget,
Sure.
the makeup on the damage of the eye from the hanger, gives him this vaguely, like, for this split second, you're seeing him Quasimodo-ish vibe.
A little bit.
But
Right,
this is another, as I was saying, this is another VHS thing.
Right.
Where for 20 years, people watching this movie, if they tried to pause it,
You just can't figure it
you
out.
couldn't get
Right.
a clear look
Right.
at it. And much like, as I mentioned earlier, as we should just mention, like, when this movie was broadcast on TV, he shot 10 more minutes of scenes while they were filming Halloween
Right.
2, which features a scene where Loomis is in the asylum with boy Michael. And I must have seen that because I always thought that was in the movie.
Right.
I must have, maybe that was on this sci-fi marathon I saw or somewhere.
have been, yeah.
Because I always was like, and of course that happens and you see the boy.
Sure.
And you don't, of course, in the actual movie. And this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, and of course his face is all deformed, and it's not. And of
Right.
course they're brother and sister, which they're not. And then I just love it. Loomis shoots him. Tommy says, "Was that the boogeyman?" He says, "Matter of fact, it was." Cue the theme. 89 minutes.
Yeah.
Revisit locations. Myers' house.
I love the revisiting the staircase, the house. Like I love all that. That's
Yeah,
such
that
a
stuff is
perfect
great.
capper.
Yeah.
That stuff is great. And I love that.
Lori sobbing, obviously.
Yes.
She's upset.
Yeah.
Been a
He's
rough
gone.
night.
He's
Get
gone.
back.
He's gone, and it's 89 minutes, and the theme is just wailing, and then the credits just.
But
start.
it's also like he could be anywhere. Like
He's
I
gone.
feel right, but it's like
Well, he could be right behind you.
Right.
It's incredible.
Wait a second. He's not
Wait,
right
there's-
behind me, is he?
You look at the reviews of this movie when it came out, and people were like really dismissive of it in a way that's kind of astonishing, where they're like, well, he's just using all the old tricks in the book. Like, especially for all the context you're setting up about how much this movie is like a manifestation of all these things that have piecemeal been building up in horror, and everyone's like, yep, it's another one of these.
It's not to speak ill of critics, but right, the sort of thing like, well, this doesn't scare me. I know from tropes.
You're
like, you won't get me.
No, this like has not been synthesized before in this way. And
know.
Siskel and Ebert, to their credit, were two of the only people of prominence at the time who were
Ebert
just like
raved it.
Right, they were like, this thing's so fucking scary.
Right,
What are you
he's-
talking about?
yes,
And the anecdote he told I thought was so good was he was like, we walked out of the screening and Gene was so scared that he took a cab home and the theater was 2 blocks from his home. That's the review of the movie. The review of the movie is it worked that well. And then I got home and I got in the shower and I was so scared shitless, I kept on checking the fucking curtain every other minute. 2 thumbs up. Go see it if you like scary movies.
David, you need to write a
You
review
can-
like that.
You can look. I should write more reviews about how I felt in the shower after.
Yeah.
I'm writing this review from a secluded location that I have moved to because I am too frightened to continue living my life.
What if I just became the most over the top
Yes.
film
But
critic
that's what
of
I'm
all?
saying. Like, yes, they loved it, and this is a wonderful response. But the canonization of these kinds of movies does not
Correct.
happen in the mainstream.
Correct.
It takes thousands and millions
Yeah.
of fans owning that tape and loving this film for decades for everybody to be like, you can't argue with it. It's a odd, as Anna said, a very weird, dreamlike movie that kind of has these strange periods of people doing laundry that don't have anything to do with anything and are inherently not scary, except
Yes.
it has this great music. And it's like, it's not tight as a drum. It's 89 minutes. So it's a tight movie, but it's not that the script, it's not like The Thing, where every single scene is perfectly functioning to move the plot forward.
Sure.
It's tight as a drum in its shape, pun intended, but it's not like, oh, there's not a wasted minute in that movie. There's
Yeah.
tons of stuff in this movie, but it's all character. It's character of Laurie being alone, and it's the sense of this town with this creepy murder house on the block and a town that has no one else in it. And all of the sort of faults, such as they are, ultimately become strengths over time.
Well, yeah, and all the happy accents of this movie. I mean, what's the producer's name? Yablanis?
Wait, the producer of this movie?
Yes.
The one who's not a cod.
Right.
Well,
Who
'cause
sort
Deborah
of
Hill
comes to
obviously
Carpenter
produces
as like...
Yapland.
Oh,
yes,
yeah, let me look-
Yapland,
yeah,
sorry.
who comes to Carpenter with like,
He's like,
what if there was a
babysitter
babysitter murder?
Right.
right.
And like that's supposed
Irwin
to be
Yablans,
the
yes.
title,
It's
right?
another great name.
Babysitter
Carpenter
murders,
had
yes.
years earlier reached out to Bob Clark and was like, you should do a Black Christmas sequel. And he's like, I don't want to do horror movies anymore. I'd like to make baby geniuses. To which I go, sounds like you're still in the horror business. But he goes to Bob Clark and he's like, would you let me write one? And he's like, no. And he sort of pitched what he thought it would be, right? Which was like, he returns a year later. So that's like part of it. There's the Yablands part of it, right? There's him
Compass International Pictures.
Sure.
He co-finances, right?
there's him experiencing the kid at the psychiatric hospital, right? Like all these pieces come together. He's able to pitch this to a cut and go like, this is simple, this is cheap. And then they realize at some point in the timeline, oh, we like this originally been planned as a movie, or at least vaguely conceptualized as a movie that would take place over multiple nights. We don't have the budget for that. So now it has to be one night because that saves
Well,
us.
it's the night he came home.
That's true.
Right.
It is the night he
But the idea that
It
like
used to be the nights he came home. but
Halloween.
the fact that the movie is Halloween is reverse engineered from we can't afford 3 nights. Let's make it one night. If it's one night, it should be the scariest night. The scariest night is Halloween. If it takes place on Halloween, we should call the movie Halloween.
And then we can
Like, the fact that
release it
they're-
around Halloween.
Right.
And then we can release it every Halloween.
But
you
like
know.
all the weird steps.
And then
of
we
them-
can make a franchise that's just called Halloween with other stuff that happened. Wait,
Right.
wait, where are you guys? Wait, where are you guys going?
Wait, you guys aren't into this? Because
all the weird like backpedaling into this, of
Yeah.
just
No,
like,
no, for
well,
sure.
we should
But
find
also,
a scary clown mask. But what if, as a weird backup option, just as an alt, we spray paint? William
It's just
Shatner?
all these things worked out.
Yeah,
But
everything worked out.
It's just of what I'm talking about of like the improbable backwards canonization of things.
Yes.
Like you could never have convinced people in the 90s that there would be in a new Halloween a shot in the trailer of silver shamrock masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And horror people are like, oh my God, they're bringing in the silver shamrock masks. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
At a time where people were like, oh, everyone knows Halloween 3 sucks. Doesn't have Michael Myers in it. You don't need to watch it. And now everyone's like, well, that movie's incredible.
Canonical masterpiece.
People
Like,
love it.
yeah,
It's
right.
about druid chips and Halloween masks. It's
sure
fucking
is.
insane.
It's very anti-Irish.
Everybody loves it, and we're going to drop an Easter egg into the marketing, and people are going to lose their minds because this thing has gone from an irrelevant failure that the franchise had to rewrite to now the second legacy sequel, which is rewriting the franchise again, but we want Silver Shamrock.
I mean, I've talked about it before, though, but the general thing of they do a sequel to this movie, then they do another movie that's not connected, and then they're like, okay, forget it, we'll do a sequel to 2, and then a sequel to 4, and then a sequel to 5. And they're like, okay, no, let's do another sequel to 2. Forget all that.
Yeah, right.
And then they're like, okay, we'll do a sequel to 7. We'll kill off Laurie Strode. That's a good idea, right?
Right.
Kill her off in like 10
Right,
minutes.
but
Most
that
of the
movie
movies
at that
about Busta
point
Rhymes.
is like Halloween 3-2.
It's Halloween Resurrection is Halloween 3-2. Sure, that's a good way to put it. And then they're like, forget all that. We'll do a reboot. Halloween 1 again. And we'll do a sequel to the
But
to the reboot.
in the
and then
sequel-
they're like, no, let's make a sequel to 1. We never did that before.
This is now
Wait, we
Halloween
did, but
2-3.
But then in the sequel to 1, so it's now
No,
Halloween.
it's Halloween 2 is what
Halloween
it is.
2,
kind of.
2. We're going to tip our hat to
Right.
Halloween 3 Season of the Witch because fans love it.
Sure.
And it's gone from something that the franchise had to immediately be like, no, forget about that, to like, well, you have to acknowledge. So
Halloween Kills is Halloween 2-2-2.
Right.
In a way.
So I'm just realizing
Where
Halloween.
it's the second movie that was the second try at a
Right.
second Halloween movie.
So Halloween Resurrection is Halloween 3-2-2.
Halloween Resurrection is Halloween 3-2.
2.
Sure, we kind of.
Because
Yes,
you're saying
yeah.
Halloween H2O
is Halloween. It's Halloween 3.
My girlfriend in
Okay,
the
fair
other
enough,
room
fair
right
enough,
now
fair
is
enough.
literally like, what the
No, but
fuck
no,
are
Griffin,
these
you're right.
guys
In that,
talking about?
It, like Halloween H2O is
she-
Halloween 3.
she probably just can't hear us
second
well enough.
edition.
Right.
Well,
Where like
yeah,
Halloween 4
sure.
is Halloween 3 first
hope not.
edition.
Right.
If that makes sense.
And this is the
And then I don't even
sequel-
know how we talk about the actual
Right, I'm
Halloween
like, this
3.
Halloween Resurrection is the sequel to the second iteration of the third Halloween movie.
And then David Gordon Green comes in and is like, no. I'm doing a sequel to Halloween. Well, we already did that. Not this way.
Right,
we
that's
didn't.
2-2.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to just say one final thing about John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Because
He has
I've talked-
nice long white hair.
He's just a cool looking guy.
He's a cool looking guy.
Is that I've talked about him so much, and this big theory that I came up with that he is kind of one of the most definitive filmmakers of the VHS era. And I don't know if you guys, I unfortunately saw your icon yesterday of your schedule, so I know you're covering somebody's watching me. But you're not,
which is before this, and it's important. Yeah.
but you're not covering cigarette burns.
We look.
Okay,
Let me just say this. Let me just say this.
We don't know what we're doing
don't know
about
yet.
those
Okay.
things
We
yet.
we plan the Patreon more short term than main feed,
course.
and so body bags, cigarette burns, those sorts of things we just haven't decided yet.
Let me
Pro-life
just say-
is the other one, right?
Yes, let me just say, I was working at Kim's Video when Masters of Horror started coming out on DVD. I cannot overstate the cultural impact in the cult and DVD collecting community. The Carpenter is back. These things are pretty fucking good. His Masters of Horror episode, I remember I tried to find footage of this. I couldn't find it. People came into the store and they were like, "You guys have cigarette burns? Sold out everywhere." And we were like, "Yes, we have 500 copies." And they were like, people were lining up at Best Buy before they opened. And it was on the news. The news was there. Cover. I was like, "What?" And they were like, "Yeah, people had, because no one had Showtime, and there was no
Sure.
TV. Didn't work in the same way. So if you missed Masters of Horror, it's like, well, 7 months from now, we'll release the episodes 2 at a time on individual DVDs."
Yeah.
And his kind of reemergence of people being like, he's crapped out, vampires, ghosts of Mars, and then it's like, he's a master of horror. He made these 2 short films. They're pretty fucking classic. And everybody lost their mind for those things. And it's just one of the craziest things where he went from being the VHS era, and now it's like, buy this DVD. It has a 1-hour John Carpenter movie on it.
Yeah.
It's $20, and there's one other 1-hour episode on it.
We'll find a way to do them.
I just want to
Right?
if it doesn't come up
Those two?
again,
I don't know.
I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody else would say, "Hey, do you guys remember what a huge deal cigarette burns was?"
No, I remember it being a big deal, but I remember it being a big deal because I was such a, dare I say it, avid, ain't a cool reader. That also felt like this weird seismic thing of like,
I'd be on, yeah, totally.
this site is now like impacting actual pop culture. Yeah.
It was just a huge deal to people who shopped at Kim's, bought a lot of DVDs, collected home video, to have John Carpenter make this thing. You couldn't have DVR'd it. There was no on demand.
Yeah.
You had to buy the DVD of his new thing that was a return to form. And it's fine. It's pretty good.
Sure.
We watched it a couple years ago. It's fine. But I had to mention it in case it never comes up again. But I hope it
it'll
does.
come up because there's going to be a lot of ways in which it's going to come up. That and pro-life.
Sure. Yes.
Body bags is another thing we also have to figure out how to tackle. There's a lot. He's done a lot
There's
of
a lot.
shit.
We're
okay?
figuring it out.
Yeah.
We're figuring it out. The point is, we've only announced someone's watching Me and Elvis
Those feel
because
just
those
kinda
are
crucial.
soon.
Sure.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and we're figuring out the rest of it.
Let's play the box office game.
Now, is this in your book of old-timey box office?
It sure is. And Halloween opened number 9 on 25th October 1978.
Naughty number
Did it
9.
open in like one theater somewhere?
No, it opened in many places,
Okay.
but then they took it out of circulation quickly and turned it into a thing. You know, where it's like
It
it's
only
coming
plays-
back.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Wow.
they turned it
Okay.
into a word of it. Part of its box office
The
success.
weird, vision for that is impressive.
Number 9 with what?
No, I don't have totals.
Okay.
Only the 80s book has totals.
Got it.
But of course, the movie, I should say, obviously, it's one of the most profitable movies of its ilk. It cost $300,000. It made like $70 million, like all told,
It
or
was
whatever.
considered the most profitable independent film of all time at that point in time. I believe.
think so, but they whenever you see
These
there's always
things, they're hard,
qualifiers
right.
loaded into these things, and it's like what's
Yeah.
independent. Obviously, Blair Witch and Paranormal
Right.
Activity and all that, eventually swing in.
Carpenter only took $10,000 for all his duties on this movie.
Yes,
but got percentage.
he did get a
points.
percentage, right? So he did make
It
money
wasn't
off
like
of
MASH
it,
where
but-
he made nothing.
Right.
But he never made as much off of how big this franchise got as he probably should have.
Yes, and
It probably cut him a nice check to do the score for the new one.
Sure.
well, that's the whole thing with the remakes and sequels. He's always like, "Are you paying me? Then I support the remake or whatever."
Of
Are you
like
not?
the,
I
of
hate
the
it."
fog.
Hold
or
out my
anything.
hand and give me the money.
Give me money.
There's also the weird circular thing where he was like, I know we need a mask. Let's go to the Don Post company. They're the best at making masks. We can't pay you any money to design anything, but we'll give you like points in the movie.
Right.
And they were like hard pass, and they were like, fuck, what are we going to do? Let's buy a Don Post mask, spray paint it white, and then they're able to produce that mask and make so much fucking money off of it. But then I think the mask rights have also gotten weird. Anyway.
I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
It seems like just
I'm excited.
so
I'm
much
excited to
lawsuit.
participate in the 70s box office.
Number 1 at the box office this week, new this week, is a film for which Oliver Stone won an Academy Award.
Midnight Express.
It's Midnight.
The winner of Best Score.
And I guess Giorgio Moroder did too.
That's a
He
movie.
did.
It is weird how like much of a sensation that movie was in the 70s versus where it stands in the canon now. Where
It
people are
is.
like, "Oh, right, Midnight Express."
Like that movie was so successful that Turkish prison just sort of became a bylaw
Right.
for like place you don't want to be.
Right. Also, like,
you know,
as someone who spent much of the lockdown watching 70s and 80s sitcoms, it's like that's still a fucking reference in 86.
you don't want to be in a Turkish prison.
You won't
Griffin.
stop. I saw Midnight Express. Like they keep on making it as if like fucking Midnight Express is Yoda or something.
And as a kid, I always got Midnight Express and Midnight Run confused.
Same.
Yes, right.
I
They're
was
very
like, I know
different, though.
one of these is fun and one of them is harrowing.
Right.
And but I don't. But now I'm confused.
Yeah.
Number 2 at the box office has been number 1, I think, for a long ass time.
I'm sorry. I'm imagining the thought experiment of what if you swapped the scores on Midnight Run and Midnight Express, and you had Midnight Express with the Danny Elfman score.
Yeah, like saxophone going.
I'm sure Midnight Run would work with the Marauder score.
It would.
Probably a nice score. This is the 3rd most successful film of 1978. It's a comedy.
Third most successful film in 1978, a comedy. Is it Stir Crazy?
It's not stir crazy.
It's not a Wilder Pryor?
No, they're not involved.
Sure. I'm trying to think of very high grossing comedies of the 70s.
Huge movie. Massive hit. Massively influential.
sequels?
Is it Up in Smoke?
No, but Up in Smoke is number 4, my friend.
Okay.
Good job.
Is it? There are no sequels.
There's other movies under the branding of this movie.
Whoa. It's a 1978 hugely influenced.
Is it Animal House?
National Lampoon's Animal House.
Oh. Well, okay.
I don't know how else to describe
Yeah,
it. There
no,
aren't
that's fine.
sequels,
That's fine.
but I
That's
mean,
fine. That's
obviously
fine.
it's a
That's
brand
fine.
they revive
That's
over
fine.
and over again.
Fine.
It is Animal House
Massively successful.
in its 14th week, and I was looking at the box office game, and I'm like, oh, it looks like Animal House is gonna be number one because it's number one for week after week
Yeah.
after week, and then Midnight Express knocks it off.
Yeah. People want to get serious for one weekend.
Number 3 at the box office, Griffin, is I think one of your favorite movies of all time, and it's new this week.
Number 3 at the box office is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's new this week. Is it by one of my favorite directors?
Yes, it's seen as a bad movie and a flop.
Is it Brewster McCloud?
No,
Widely
that's
perceived.
70.
That's 70?
Yeah. Or 71.
71. It's the same year as another.
It comes out the
great
same year
Altman
as
movie.
MASH.
Right. Yeah.
I forgot it was that early.
It's very early. Yeah. Okay, wait a second. It's one of my favorite directors. It's seen as a flop.
At the time, I believe it's certainly poorly received.
David's sitting back with his smug look on his face because he's astonished that I wouldn't immediately recall
astonished. I just
that, of course,
knew-
the most important American film of 1978 is Sidney Lumet's The Wiz,
Correct. It's The Wiz.
a movie I study maybe as obsessively as you study Halloween.
Jeez.
And a movie in which I think the powers are similar. I like the fact that every musical number in that movie is shot like it's from the perspective of Michael Myers 5 blocks away, observing these pitiful people and their miserable life as they dance their way to doom.
What a wild.
It's a movie about the
This is a pretty-
existential loneliness of the human condition.
This is a pretty good top 5. Right?
how oppressed people
Well,
use
things
music
used to be very bonkers.
convince themselves that there's any joy in life. It's a masterpiece.
I gotta see The Wiz. We'll do
I mean, look,
Roommate
here's the
someday.
thing. It's a masterpiece that I find half of its running time unwatchable.
I find all of his running time unwatchable.
I think half of it's as good as anything anyone's
Alex
captured.
says all.
The unwatchable stuff,
Zero
I still
watchable
find
minutes
compelling.
in that movie, in my opinion.
It's so good.
So just to recap our top 4: Midnight Express, Animal House, The Wiz, and Up in Smoke. I'm just saying.
I mean-
you can have a good time at the American
Yeah.
movie theaters right now.
Yeah.
Number 5 is a comedy from one of Griffin's favorite directors. He's already been invoked in this box office game.
He's already been invoked in
Look, it's this year's Altman's movie.
Oh,
this year's Altman
right.
movie.
So 78 would be. Fuck. Okay, because wait, Nashville 75, right? Or 76?
Nashville is 1975.
So then 78 would be, it's this year's Altman movie. It's not a very big hit.
No,
Is it?
but it
Wait,
is
a
a
movie
comedy.
of his is called Not a Very Big
No,
Hat.
sorry. Is it a wedding?
It's a wedding,
Okay.
which I've never seen.
I never have either. It's a weird blind spot.
Yeah.
Have you seen a
I
wedding?
have, yeah.
Desi Arnaz, right?
Sure.
I believe he's the star.
I
Mia
saw it,
Farrow,
yeah.
Carol Burnett.
Carol Burnett. Let's
I
see.
saw it
Paul
at the big
Dooley.
Altman series
Mia
at MoMA
Farrow.
like 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It's
Surprised-
set at a wedding, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
much
what if
about
there
it.
was
It's
a wedding?
comedy.
What if there's a wedding? It's Nashville at a wedding. Yeah.
It's just it's the beginning of because
It's not
after
Margot
Nashville,
at the wedding. It's Nashville at the
It's
wedding.
Nashville. at the
76 is Buffalo Bill. 77 is Three Women, which is obviously great. 78 is a wedding.
and the
79 is
79's Perfect
Quintet.
Couple. Oh, Quintet.
And
next.
Perfect
Jeez.
Couple, same year.
Okay.
And then 80 is Health and Popeye. You know,
Just
he's
4
struck-
years in the basement.
He's swimming against the current at this point.
Yeah, that's rough.
Number 6 is a movie called The Big Fix with Richard Dreyfuss. I don't know it.
I gotta fix it.
One of those,
I'm
one of
sure
those-
that's what it's like.
Yeah.
one of those Dreyfus vehicles that
You know
no
what?
one
I'm gonna say
no one has watched.
that is pretty much the
Oh,
vibe
I
I'm
know
getting
this
from this poster. It's a
I
good
like
poster.
this poster. I've seen this poster.
He's
a lot.
peeking.
That's a real
They're
poster.
looking
that's like,
to fix
look,
this thing.
Are you in or are you not? Like we're giving you all we've got here.
The Boys from Brazil, Gregory Peck. You got Death on the Nile with Peter Ustinov.
Uh-huh. I've never seen any of the Ustinov.
We just watched that
Corduroys.
last year. It's pretty solid. That,
Really?
that movie. Yeah.
There's Halloween, which I think we talked about on this episode,
a
and
little
then
bit, yeah.
and then Comes a Horseman. A great
great
title.
Is that the Alan Pecula movie?
I'm looking it up because I do
He
know
has
the
some
title.
movie with a title
it's,
that's that or like that.
It's Pecula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
Jane
good-
Fonda, James Caan. Yeah.
I was gonna say 70s horse movies. You have Electric Horseman. You have Comes a Horseman. You have They Shoot Horses, Don't They? It was
that's 68 though,
What if
right?
they shot
okay,
what if
okay.
they shot horses? Didn't they? I don't know.
that was the pitch. What if? And hear
What
me
if
out.
they shot horses?
They
didn't
shot horses, didn't they?
So what's it about? It's about people like roller skating for 5 days straight.
I just love the
Roller
idea of-
skating in a circle?
Or maybe the studio, he was like, the movie's called They Shoot Horses. And the studio's like, nah, that's too gross.
Little-
Let's add a don't they just to kind of maybe make
I think
it
a lot of other
ambiguous.
movies could be improved by that at the end.
Midnight Express, isn't it? Like, or
All these
whatever.
movie titles, they're so arrogant. They're so assured of what they're saying. What you have no question?
All right.
David, how many weekends has The Wiz been in release at this point?
I told you it's new this week.
Jesus. Okay, and it's opening at number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This
Midnight
movie,
Express, The Wiz, and Halloween are the new, and Comes a Horseman are the new movies this week.
I just want to say for perspective, I believe
Yes.
1978, the same year that Halloween was made for $325,000. I believe The Wiz cost $40 million. It cost more than Star Wars the year before.
I'm seeing here 24 million, which is still triple the budget of Star Wars.
Sure. Okay, fair enough.
But you know,
Yes.
a lot.
Yes.
But yes, I have never seen The Wiz. Of course, we all love the tagline to The Wiz, Griff.
What if there was a Wiz?
The Wiz, the stars, the music. Wow.
Yeah.
Crash. A gutter comes through the window.
All right, we're done. We're done.
We're done.
Yeah,
We're
I
done.
have
We're
nothing.
done.
I have nothing
Ben-
else in my notes.
Then read that time code to me there.
So we've probably definitely gone over 3, probably like 3:15. I'm guessing
3:15 before ads.
before ads.
Short
So
ads.
this might be number 1, right?
I think it might be.
and
It
I
was
gotta say,
inevitable.
I have to say,
Thanos' voice.
not at all my intention. I didn't want.
Bullshit. I call
Wait a
shenanigans
second,
on
for
that.
weeks you were
No,
like,
no,
the
no.
manifesto just
Weeks,
got another
no,
page.
months.
Like,
5 months.
My intention was pure density. I had no. I thought I didn't know if I could
Alex, I agree with that. You were not being tangenty. You came in with
Yes,
a manifesto.
you're focused.
You had a lot you wanted to talk about, and we talked about all of it. I
I was-
agree with that. It's not like you came in and you were like, we got to do 10 minutes on Guns N' Roses.
No, but
It
that
would be
density
very
requires some
funny
space.
if he came in and I talked about the worst movie by this great director for the longest amount of time. It's more like it would have hurt so much to be like, Blank Check's doing Halloween Sunday morning, loaded up, and I see and I'm like,
150.
yeah, 150, and I'm like, what the hell went wrong? And you load it up, and it's just like, so the thing about Star Wars, and I'm just like, guys, come on, what are we doing here? We need to be
Why
on.
does anyone listen to this show?
This is a big one. You have to be on topic, and I have to break my pattern to come on. So thank you for letting me sit on this episode for 4 months.
I think it's our best ever.
Really?
I don't know. I thought this was a pretty good episode, to be honest.
I don't know.
I had a lot of fun, and it was great to be in person.
It was nice to be in person.
It wouldn't have been that long if we had not been in person.
Correct.
You say this.
I don't know. But you remember
Remember
the
how long the
level.
lucky numbers-
But I'm saying we were at levels of like space madness by the end of that. Like we were.
I would say, genuinely insane.
You were
Yeah.
furious. I felt like
Yes.
I was hallucinating.
You can no longer be like, my battery's dying. Goodbye, everybody.
My battery, I believe, I'm sure was dying. I have no doubt.
No, but also I'll say I've seen David's red indicator light flickering several times in this episode.
Okay. I don't
He's
even know
got
where
one at
that
the
is.
side in his temple.
Okay. Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
David's personal red
Yes,
indicator
yes.
light.
No, his devices are fine.
His druid chip that's in the mask on his head.
Yes. Well said. Alex, thank you.
Thank you so much.
David has moved his mic away.
is the
That's
thing I used to
how
do a lot.
conclusively done he is with this
done.
episode.
He swings
We're
it away
done.
like a shock jock who's just made his final big joke.
I'm putting my chips in. I'm like, enough. I'm not gambling anymore. tonight.
Basta. Thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank
Hey,
you, too.
Halloween rules.
Halloween rules,
Oh.
John Carpenter rules. I'm so happy to be at the beginning of what's going to just be a wonderful series of episodes with great films, 12 of which I've rewatched in the last month.
Hell yeah.
Thank you to Marie Brody for our social media. Thank you to Pat Reynolds and Joe Bowen for our artwork. Thank you to JJ Birch, Nick Loriano, and Alex Ross Perry for our research this week. I think you deserve that credit, even though you were not on payroll.
No, a labor of love.
Labor of love. Labor of love. Jesus, I need to stop talking. Thank you to AJ McKeon and Alex Barron for editing. Go to blankies.reddit.com for some real nerdy shit. And you can go to patreon.com/blankcheck for blank check special features where we are spelunking in the dark with a man they call Richard B. Riddick. Right? No, what better way to describe it? And as we said, someone's watching me and Elvis coming on the Patreon in coming weeks. So timeline's a little wonky on that, but if you want to fill in those necessary gaps with those 2 big TV movies from early on in his career. Tune in next week for The Fog with Nia DaCosta returning to the show just in time for Candyman. And as always,
He could have seen us through this window. Standing on the lawn, he could have seen inside.
Crap! A pike goes through the window.